I sat motionless, feeling trapped as my wife of 25 years explained the reasons behind serving me divorce papers. I struggled to fully comprehend her words. She noticed my distraction and asked if I was present. I apologized, admitting I had zoned out. She reiterated the terms of the divorce, emphasizing their clarity and non-negotiability. She insisted I keep the house, cars, and all the money in the bank. She urged me to sign, assuring me the process would be finalized in 3 months. Speechless, I reflected on our life together. Marcy and I had been together since high school, raising our twin daughters, Cindy and Sandy, who went off to Columbia University. We had a cozy suburban home, both drove Volvos, and Marcy had her own credit cards and phone. I never denied her anything, never strayed or mistreated her. She never seemed discontented or voiced any grievances. This blindsided me. Perhaps that was the issue. I hadn't paid enough attention. I get the mechanics of divorce, Marcy, but can you at least explain why? It might be too late to change anything, but I want to understand. Marcy slouched into a kitchen chair, clearly avoiding the conversation, hoping I'd just sign and let her go. Give me something, Marcy. What did I do? You didn't do anything, Alan. You were perfect. Sometimes I wished you'd slip up so I'd have a reason to leave, but you never did. You did a great job with the kids and put them through college. You always gave me what I wanted, even when I was difficult. You got us a nice house. My folks love you. Don't think you're at fault because you're not. She appeared about 45, with flawless skin and perfectly styled light brown hair gleaming in the sunlight. She jogged often, maintaining a toned physique and tan. Weekdays found her casually dressed, but she could glam up when she chose. Marcy thought she was as perfect as me, or so she said. I couldn't fathom what was truly happening. I'm sorry, but this doesn't add up. There has to be a reason. You can't just brush it off like that. There's more to it. Alan, I'm trying to spare your feelings and save face. Let's leave it at that. No, Alan, I found someone else. He's a real estate developer with a swanky apartment overlooking the river and a sleek black Mercedes. He's attractive, wealthy, and head over heels for me. You've always been, and still are, a grocery store clerk. I'm not knocking your job. You've always provided and made us comfortable, but you'll always be a clerk. I wanted more. I never saw you strive for more. It hurt. Even though I managed the grocery department, she still saw me as just a clerk. When offered a chance to advance and move away, I declined to keep our family together. Look how that ended up. It stung, but I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Does this wealthy, good-looking guy have a name? Clayton Manning. He's the president of Keystone Development Company. How long have you known him? 6 months. Did you sleep with him? Marcy sat up straight in her chair. Her eyes scanned the room before locking onto mine. Yes, I've been avoiding this, but since you insist, yes, we were still married. Yes, I cheated on you. I was unfaithful. Are you satisfied now? I sat for a moment, then reached for the divorce papers, signing them in 3 places, initialing 2, and passing them to her across the table. I think he's better suited for you. Sorry to disappoint. I rose and left the room. As I exited, Marcy yelled, No, that's not why. He wasn't better than you, just different. Don't you dare believe that, Alan. Don't you dare. By then, I was out the door. I was so engrossed in my work and hobbies that I didn't even notice Marcy gradually moving her things out of the house. By the time she handed me the papers, she had already relocated most of her clothes and personal belongings to Clayton's apartment. She left behind all the wedding and family photos so I could enjoy them while she was gone. Upon returning home, she was nowhere to be found. Her Volvo remained in the driveway, and I assumed she wouldn't need it anymore. On the kitchen table, she had left a power of attorney to sell the house and car. I spent the rest of the night disposing of the beer in the refrigerator. By then, I realized there was no turning back, and I didn't want to either. Marcy was gone and would be gone the next morning. I contacted work and took 3 months of overdue vacation. They had been urging me to take time off, so there was no issue. I had plenty of vacation and sick leave. I quickly called the girls at school and briefly explained that we were parting ways, but refused to divulge more details. They wanted to call Marcy, but I didn't have her new phone number. With 3 months ahead to gather myself and figure out my next steps, I disconnected my landline, changed my cell phone number, and canceled the one Marcy had. The Volvo dealer assessed the low book value of Marcy's car. I had a high school friend, Terry, who was now a real estate broker. He agreed to sell the house without listing it at a low price and with a quick settlement. As a precaution, I canceled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I cashed in my life insurance policies. It was time to get things in order. I went through the house and collected everything that might belong to my wife. There was enough stuff to fill 3 trash bags. I packed the girls' personal belongings into boxes and stored them in the closet next to the house. I spent 3 hours sorting through family photos, putting all the girls' pictures in a box for them. All of Marcy's pictures went into the trash can. It might have been foolish, but I didn't care. The primary issue I faced was a lack of direction. I had no idea what I would do after 3 months. Would I stay here or leave? Would I continue working or seek something new? I had 2 hobbies. I mainly collected coins, especially those with an Indian head on them. They were easy to collect and readily available. I bought and sold them on eBay and enjoyed it. My other passion was geocaching. It gave me an excuse to get outside and exercise. Marcy hated this activity because of ticks, poison ivy, and walking. I didn't see how I could make a living doing any of these activities. When I wasn't occupied with my hobbies, I devoted time to reading the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gifted me a subscription every Christmas. While I had no interest in stocks and bonds, I absorbed everything related to farm commodities. I possessed more knowledge about sugar, wheat, and corn than most market analysts. However, it remained merely a hobby as I had no investments in it. My research extended to Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry Davis unearthed more information about Clayton and his latest project than I could ever manage, delving into details with a friend at a local bank. I eagerly awaited his findings. Weeks passed without any sign of Marcy. The girls called weekly, but their mom remained silent. I felt their support, yet they still had to show loyalty to their mother. Holding a few yard sales, I cleared out many items, leaving enough furniture to maintain the house's appeal to potential buyers. Marcy and Clayton's photo appeared in the society section of the Sunday paper, attending a political rally with local dignitaries. After a couple more weeks, Terry presented a lowball offer on the house, well below its appraisal, but with a 60-day closing, which suited me. He had intriguing information about Clayton and proposed a lunch meeting. I figured I needed a break from the house and accepted. Hayes Mountain stood out as a prime location for hiking and geocaching. Although I'd already found all the geocaches there, 3 landmarks remained to be discovered. Landmarks, metal rods set in concrete, scattered across the country, aiding surveyors and real estate professionals in delineating property lines. Locating these landmarks was akin to a bonus quest for dedicated geocachers. Today, I resolved to track down all 3 landmarks on the mountain, equipped with my GPS and a metal detector. Hayes Mountain, nearly 2,000 acres in size, mostly belonged to the Madison Land Trust, which relied on donations to preserve its expanse amidst encroaching urban development. Adjacent to the trust's parking area, an orchard and farmhouse were up for sale, marked by a prominent sign. As I parked, I wandered over to the orchard fence, feeling a pang of sadness at the prospect of this picturesque site succumbing to development. "Are you considering buying it or just enjoying the view?" came a voice from behind. I turned to see an elderly man approaching, dressed in overalls and a John Deere cap. I chuckled. "If I had $1 million, I'd snatch it up in a heartbeat," I replied. He grinned back. "Do you think you'll have any trouble selling it?" he asked. "Well, I've got some interested parties, but I'm holding out as long as I can," I replied. "Why's that?" I inquired. "I was hoping the land trusts would acquire it, but they're short on cash. They want to preserve the fruit trees as they are, but the developers want to bulldoze everything," he said. "I think it'd be a real asset to the area," I remarked. "But how can the trust compete with those big companies?" he explained. "I've offered them a good deal, even though it's listed for $1 million. I'm willing to let them have it for $600,000, but they're struggling to gather the cash in time," he replied. "If they can't, then that real estate guy gets his hands on it," he grumbled. "He's been pestering me every week." "An option isn't a sure thing, right?" I asked. "Nope," he said. "He pays $100,000 for the option to buy it later for $1 million. If he can't come up with the cash, he loses that money. It's a good deal for me, but I don't want him to succeed," he added. "He's got the funds locked up, so he's in the clear. The problem is, he needs all 6 properties for the deal to go through. That's why he's offering more than it's worth." "What if you don't sell him the option?" I inquired. "He'll be in serious trouble," the old man chuckled. "If he doesn't get that lot, the whole deal falls apart and he loses everything. He's invested maybe $1 million. His backers will bail and you'll be left high and dry." "I'd help you out if I could," I said sympathetically. "Appreciate it," he replied, sounding somewhat resigned. "They all say that." We shared another laugh, and I set off on my walk. His mention of Keystone caught my attention. The landmarks were about a mile apart, at least as the crow flies. But on the mountain, it felt more like 2 miles. Locating the first 2 markers was easy. They were typical surveyor's markers, but the third one? That was a different story. It was older, harder to find, buried under years of forest debris. When I finally stumbled upon it, I discovered a small brick monument with a bronze plaque attached. It was concealed beneath layers of leaves and dirt. I snapped a picture, thinking it might be worth sharing in a magazine. And then everything changed. As I moved away from the marker, my metal detector started beeping. It was faint, but it was definitely there. I slipped on my headphones and began scanning the nearby area. After some poking around, I unearthed a small iron box wrapped in oil-soaked canvas. It was rusty but sturdy, with a heavy bronze lock. Normally, discoveries like this on public land are considered treasures and handed over to the authorities. But for some reason, that didn't feel right to me. So I tucked the box into my bag and headed home. On the way back, I couldn't stop wondering about the contents of my little discovery. Gold coins, historic documents from the Civil War. The possibilities were endless, limited only by the size of the container. Back at home, I cleared the kitchen table and carefully inspected my discovery. I hesitated to damage the lock, but seeing no other way in, I reluctantly decided to use my bolt cutter. Inside the box, beneath another layer of oiled canvas, lay a dozen pennies. But these were no ordinary pennies. They were large cents dating as far back as 1793. Surprisingly, they were in excellent condition, showing no signs of green corrosion. Although I typically favored Indian head pennies for their value, I recalled a book my grandfather left me titled The Quirks of the Penny, which explored various types and varieties of large cents. I found the book dull as I didn't possess any of the coins it described. Yet tonight, it would finally serve a purpose. I stayed up until dawn, studying the pages with my grandfather's book and a magnifying glass. Using my scanner, I captured detailed high-resolution photos of each coin, revealing every tiny imperfection on the stamps and showcasing the condition of each coin. I slept in until noon, feeling refreshed, yet eager to check in on work. Upon calling, I learned that Phil Williams, a company executive, had inquired about me. However, with more pressing matters at hand, I didn't dwell on it. Acquiring a safe deposit box from the bank became my next priority. After extensive online research, I was astonished to discover that my pennies were valued at several $1,000,000, not just due to their age, but also their condition and stamp varieties. It made me understand why criminals went to great lengths to launder money. Converting my coins into cash wouldn't be easy. Over breakfast at IHOP, I noticed another photo in the paper of Marcy and Clayton at an art gallery opening, triggering my next move. Once the safe arrived, I contacted John Smart and asked him to delay any decisions about the land for a few days, which he agreed to. Then, I visited the Land Trust office to explore making a donation, to which they were enthusiastic. With the final divorce just 4 weeks away, I felt a sense of urgency. The remainder of the day was spent researching coin dealers and auction houses for any signs of trouble. Eventually, I settled on Towers and Burns in New York City, as they seemed equipped to handle controversial sales. Discreetly, I arranged an appointment with them for Monday afternoon to cap off the day. I called the girls and organized lunch together on Monday morning, keeping the morning free. Upon arriving at Towers and Burns, I was impressed by the modern, sophisticated showroom. After providing my name, I was escorted to a less glamorous section of the building. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I hear you have some intriguing coins to show us. Is this your first visit to the city?" I took a seat opposite James Towers. Though his face was familiar from ads, he appeared a bit older now. "Thank you. My daughters attend Columbia University, so I've been here before, but never for business. While I don't doubt your expertise in coins, do you have a team member who specializes in early copper coins? Having them present could be beneficial." I'm not too touchy about it, and I think that's a great idea. He signaled to the intercom. Murray, could you have Cookson join us in my office? Maurice Cookson, known for his guides on large cents and half cents, soon entered. He appeared older than his photos, but then again, who doesn't mind looking younger? I have 12 special coins to sell today. I hope to sell 4 and keep the 5th for your consideration. The rest I'll retain for now. If today goes well, I'll offer those to you as well. I know it sounds incredible, but I believe 6 of them will qualify for conditional census status. Mr. Cookson can confirm whether I'm correct. Where did these coins originate? James inquired. They were handed down to me by my grandfather upon his passing, I responded. Not to cast doubt, Mr. Simmons, but the story is a bit hard to believe. Can you display what you have? I laid out 4 photos on the table, each exhibiting both sides of one of the coins I'm offering today. They were enlarged about 5 times their actual size and crystal clear. James and Morris scrutinized each photo carefully for several minutes. So what's your asking price for these 4? James asked. A quick glance at recent auctions suggests I could fetch about $1.3 million for them. I initially thought $1 million, but your figure isn't out of the realm of possibility, Morris remarked. He really knows his stuff when it comes to pennies, James added. I'm willing to offer $800,000 for the lot, but under one condition. What sort of condition are we talking about? I inquired. I have a special letter from the land trust about donating land. I'd like you to take a look at it, along with an advertisement for John Smart's orchard, I said, handing them over. I'd like you to purchase this plot of land and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The price is $600,000. You'll score a hefty tax deduction and earn some serious karma points. Give us a moment, please, James said, motioning to Morris. They huddled at the far end of the room, deep in conversation, and after a few minutes, Morris stepped out and James returned to the table. Do you have any coins on you? He asked. Yes, and I've got a 5th one I'd like to keep in the mix, I replied. Mr. Cookson reappeared with a purple crown royal bag. We're willing to honor your terms on the land deal and hope you'll do the same on the coin deal, he said, dumping the bag's contents onto the table. It was a treasure trove of nearly 100 coins, mostly gold, with some silver mixed in. The retail value of this collection is around $300,000, James explained. For various reasons, we've had trouble selling them, but you shouldn't have any issues. You've sold coins on eBay before, right? I nodded. Your grandfather's coins should fly off the shelves, and we'll both come out ahead, James said with a wink. After some consideration, I agreed. I handed over the 4 pennies to Mr. Towers, and we sealed the deal with handshakes all around. Now, Mr. Simmons, tell us about this 5th coin, James prompted. I held up the photo and described it as the top-rated 1793 strawberry coin I'd ever seen. I rated it an 8, but I'm no expert, I added. Both James and Maurice leaned in, eager to see the photo. Morris had a big grin, and James had a twinkle in his eye. How much? James asked. Best offer, as long as you can figure out how to pay me, I replied. Would you like some coffee, Mr. Simmons? Letitia, an absolutely stunning woman, asked as she entered the room. Sure, black's fine, I replied. They left the room. About 30 minutes later, James returned with Letitia. Letitia Rothberg introduced herself and inquired about Mr. Simmons's possession of a passport. He confirmed that he did indeed have one. She then informed him that they would soon be heading to JFK to establish a new offshore bank account for him. Letitia also asked if he had anything for Mr. Towers. Mr. Simmons handed over the 1793 strawberry, which elicited excitement from James. He expressed his gratitude before leaving the room. Although they didn't agree on a price, Towers showed great enthusiasm for the 7 coins. Mr. Towers agreed to hold on to the small bag of coins until Simmons returned. Shortly after, Letitia and Mr. Simmons found themselves seated on a plane headed for the Cayman Islands. She didn't say much during the flight. When we landed, photographers were clamoring to snap her picture. She seemed both irritated and amused by the attention. I was clueless as to why she was such a celebrity. It was my first time flying first class, and it was over in a flash. A bright yellow mini SUV awaited us at the terminal. Letitia wasted no time hopping into the driver's seat, flashing her tanned legs in the process. I couldn't help stealing glances. Feeling a bit flustered, she seemed to find my discomfort amusing. 20 minutes later, we arrived at a mid-sized condo building. Letitia owned the entire building but used the top floor as her personal space. "Care for anything, Mr. Simmons?" she asked as she left the room. Watching her leave was just as captivating as seeing her foot in the terminal. I'm not one to gush over women, but Letitia Rothberg was captivating. We stepped onto a small balcony overlooking the ocean. It was stunning, but the wind was a bit much for my liking. She was probably trying to impress me with the luxurious surroundings, but my mind was more on the new bank account. "You're not much of a talker, Mr. Simmons. Don't you have any questions?" she asked. "It strikes me as odd that someone of your stature would drink beer from a bottle," I remarked. "I'd imagine you sipping champagne or martinis instead." "I usually think it's best to wait, but I suppose you could tell me why we had to come here to open a bank account," I added. "It's a simple, secure place to stash your cash. I think it'll serve you well," she replied. "You've got 7 more coins after all. That still seems like overkill," I admitted. To my relief, we headed back indoors, away from the wind. "Can you handle this?" Letitia suddenly asked, catching me off guard. "I brought you here to be myself for a few days." Her unexpected comment brought a smile to my face. I knew she was joking, but it was a humorous moment nonetheless. She had a great sense of humor, looked stunning, and had a fortune to boot. What more could a guy ask for? "If only I were a decade younger. Teasing an old man won't do any good," I joked, and we both chuckled at the situation. "Come on, Mr. Simmons, let's go grab some fresh lobsters for dinner," she suggested, and we downed the last of our long necks before heading out the door. The restaurant was amazing, but the wine the hostess selected didn't agree with me. I tried to handle it politely, but my discomfort must have been evident. "What's wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons?" she inquired. "I'm sorry, it's just a reflex. When I was 18, I got sick on cheap white wine, and ever since the smell or taste of it makes me nauseous," I explained. "But don't worry about it. It's good wine." A few minutes later, we were served 2 fresh long necks. Strangely, there wasn't much conversation during the meal. Afterwards, we each had a slice of key lime pie and sipped coffee. "So, tell me about yourself. Are you married? Any kids? What do you do for a living?" she asked, eager to know more about me. "We've got all night, and I'm curious about how we ended up here," she added. "That's quite a few questions," I chuckled. "I have 2 daughters, both studying something related to international banking at Columbia University. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what they're studying. I just pay the bills." "That's interesting. I actually hold a master's degree from Columbia and occasionally lecture there. I've met both of my daughters," I continued. "Did you see them this morning?" she asked. "We had lunch together. They're not too thrilled when I make them skip class," I replied with a smile. "You must have married early if you have 2 daughters in college," she observed. "Yeah, it does sound like a movie line," I chuckled. I felt comfortable with this Mediterranean beauty. I could have conversed with her for hours. As for me, I'm currently separated from my wife. It feels strange to say, I admitted. She left me for some wealthy wheeler dealer. He's probably into building shopping malls or business complexes, judging by his fancy car and big apartment. She said she's moving on, and the divorce should be finalized in about 4 weeks. "That's a flimsy reason to end a good marriage," she remarked sympathetically. "Yeah, I thought everything was fine, until she met this guy. I guess she was never satisfied with my career choice," I reflected. "I had opportunities to advance, but she didn't want to budge. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I thought it was necessary to save the marriage. Now I just feel empty." "And what about you?" I asked, shifting the focus back to her. There was a moment of silence. "How do you tell a beautiful, wealthy, successful woman that you manage a grocery store?" She noticed my discomfort and reassured me, saying, "It's not a big deal. We can discuss it later." "No, it's okay. I'm not ashamed of my profession," I reassured her. "It's just that managing a supermarket as a grocery manager isn't exactly a glamorous job that impresses the ladies. My daughters don't mind, but my wife often conveniently forgot to mention it in conversations. I could tell it bothered her. "Do you find satisfaction in your work?" she inquired, as the server brought more coffee and cleared the table. "Yeah, I do, and I'm pretty proficient at it," I replied. "Mr. Simmons, I know we've just met, but I believe first impressions matter. So what's your initial impression of me?" she asked. Her question put me in a bit of a dilemma. If I expressed my genuine thoughts, I might push her away. But if I attempted to flatter her, she'd see through it and perceive me as insincere. What should I do? In summary, I see you as beautiful, intelligent, educated, and confident, I said, noticing a slight smirk on her face as she tilted her head down and looked up at me. I was hoping for honesty, she confessed. I'm sorry, but we were having such a pleasant evening. I didn't want to spoil it, I apologized. Do you truly have such a low opinion of me? She questioned, her tone becoming serious. Maybe that's why your wife left you for another man. If you hadn't always tried to please her, your marriage would have been stronger. Her words stung, but I had to acknowledge there was some truth to them. You use your beauty and charm to achieve your goals. You're accustomed to getting your way, and I sense a hint of entitlement. You play with men, but fear commitment, yet you seem astute with finances, understanding how to spend and invest wisely. If you weren't so determined to prove yourself equal to any man, you might actually make a good mother, I said, feeling uneasy, but also somewhat annoyed by her earlier comment about my marriage. After a moment of silence, they exchanged looks, and she softened her tone, questioning if he genuinely believed she would make a good mother. As they drove back to the condo, the tension dissipated, and the atmosphere lightened. Their night together turned out uneventful due to separate bedrooms, which suited him fine as he hadn't expected anything. The following morning, he woke to find breakfast waiting for him along with a copy of the Wall Street Journal. Enjoying the tranquility on the balcony, he noticed the wind had died down. About 20 minutes later, Letitia joined him, playfully taking a section of the newspaper as they settled in. They quietly read and savored their coffee, as if it were a routine they'd been following for years. Despite their brief acquaintance, everything felt natural and effortless with her. He mentioned without hesitation that his phone didn't work there, and he wanted to call his daughters. Letitia offered me her cell phone and told me it was mine to use. Anxiously, I asked Cindy where she was and if everything was okay. Cindy explained that she was in the Cayman Islands, staying with a friend, and had to use her friend's phone because hers was acting up. I pushed further, mentioning that a picture of her boarding a plane with Letitia Rothberg was shown on TV the previous night, asking what was happening. Cindy responded that Letitia was the friend she mentioned and questioned why it was a big deal. I cautioned Cindy about being cautious and warned her about Letitia Rothberg's reputation as a ruthless person as Letitia passed by with the breakfast tray. I introduced Letitia to Cindy as my daughter and mentioned that Cindy was in New York. Upon hearing Letitia's name, Cindy groaned over the phone, and I could hear her and her sister Sandy discussing something quickly on the other end. "Why are you there? How do you know her? Are you coming home?" Cindy bombarded me with questions. Before I could answer, Letitia was already reaching for the phone. "Hi, Cindy. It's Letitia. Your dad told me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow and would love to have lunch with both of you. Where should I pick you up?" Of course, I couldn't hear Cindy's response from my end of the conversation. "Okay, Cindy, talk to you later. Bye," Letitia said, handing me back my cell phone. "Your daughter said goodbye. Looks like we're having lunch tomorrow. I'll be on my best behavior, even if they think I'm a shark," she chuckled, heading to her room. An hour later, we found ourselves at the Federal Reserve Bank of the Cayman Islands. With Letitia guiding me, I established my first offshore bank account. 20 minutes later, I saw that my new account had been credited with $4 million from Towers and Burns. It seemed like a fair price for 215 pennies. After our meal, she arranged for a friend to take us to feed manta rays. Over dinner, I asked about her job at Towers and Burns, and learned that she actually owns 60% of the company. "So what else can you tell me about yourself?" I prodded, feeling somewhat embarrassed about my lack of knowledge regarding her. "I was born and raised in London, my dad's Syrian and my mom's Turkish. I hold an MBA from Columbia University. Relationship-wise, I've been engaged twice but haven't been in anything serious for over 3 years. I've learned not to trust men who show interest in me. Call it cynicism, but I often feel like they have ulterior motives," she shared. "That's unfortunate," I responded, feeling a pang of sympathy. "I was hoping for a ride back to the condo. Does that mean you don't trust me, you big idiot?" she playfully teased. "I'm sorry if I seemed insensitive. I didn't mean to. It's just hard for me to relate," I apologized, feeling a bit embarrassed. "All right, let's just relax. We have a party to attend," she changed the subject, steering the conversation towards lighter topics. Later that evening, we ended up at a cocktail party in a prestigious hotel. She attracted all the attention, everyone treating her like royalty. Meanwhile, I did my best to blend in, feeling out of place in my New York street clothes. Initially, Letitia felt obliged to stick by my side, but I encouraged her to enjoy herself and let me fade into the background, where I felt more comfortable. However, she kept checking on me throughout the night. I ended up chatting with a couple of Hispanic gentlemen, cattle ranchers from Argentina. Our conversation started with soccer and eventually turned to fishing. Despite my limited knowledge, I tried to keep up, mostly nodding and smiling along. Then the topic shifted to investments when Ramon York brought up his interest in winter wheat. I listened intently as he explained his plans, though I couldn't help but wonder how someone with his apparent wealth could invest in something he seemed to know so little about. My confusion showed on my face. "Mr. Simmons, your expression tells me you're not on board with the winter wheat investment idea," Ramon observed, catching me off guard. My attempt to remain unnoticed had failed miserably. "I apologize, Ramon. I'm not really savvy when it comes to investing, and this topic is a bit beyond my expertise," I admitted, opting for a casual first-name basis to ease my discomfort. "But I have a feeling you've got some thoughts on the matter," Ramon persisted, trapping me into sharing my opinion. Feeling cornered, I mustered a weak smile. "I think I need another drink," I deflected, buying myself some time. For the next hour, I listened as an Alabama greengrocer elaborated on the promising winter wheat crop in Alberta and Saskatchewan, countering the poor harvest in the States. His explanation was thorough, but my mind struggled to keep up with the complexities of the discussion. Just when I was running out of witty remarks, Letitia came to my rescue, whisking me away from the intense conversation. As we walked off, she questioned me about the unexpected turn of events. "What was that all about, Alan? We were just chatting about food groceries," she remarked, with a hint of amusement, flashing a small smile in my direction. The following morning, we flew back to New York, where a swarm of photographers awaited Letitia's arrival. A courier from Towers and Burns handed me a package containing the coins I had left behind. After bidding Letitia farewell, I made my way to the commuter train terminal, headed back to Huntsville. The divorce proceedings and the sale of the house unfolded according to plan. Phil Williams from the main office had left me multiple messages, urging me to consider relocating to the company's headquarters in New York. This time, I agreed. John, overwhelmed, also reached out, asking for a lunch meeting at work. I tucked myself into my locker, bidding farewell to my colleagues. As I prepared for my upcoming move to a newspaper, I noticed a photo of Clayton and Marcy at a local politician's barbecue, looking like the perfect couple. With 3 weeks left, I spent a whole day scanning and identifying the coins from the bag I brought back from New York. Determined to maximize their value, I decided to list them on eBay as soon as possible. As long as I didn't encounter any shady characters, everything should go smoothly. It took an entire day to create those coin listings, along with preparing envelopes and labels for shipping. All the payments went into my PayPal account and then off to my new offshore bank. With the weekend ahead, I finally had some time to relax. My Friday lunch with John Simard was interesting. He seemed pleased that Clayton was involved, but wasn't happy that I didn't benefit from the deal. Trying to explain it to him would have been a headache. Lunch went well, and as he was leaving, he handed me the deeds to 5 acres of land on the outskirts of town. It seems good deeds do get rewarded. Not long after parting ways with John, my cell phone buzzed. Cindy and Sandy were landing in Nashville in a couple of hours, giving me plenty of time to pick them up. They chose Nashville because the airfare was cheaper than flying into Huntsville, and they were watching their expenses. It was easy to get there and pick them up. Cindy couldn't wait to talk about ILSH. The lecture hall was packed with over 300 students for an advanced corporate finance course. Mid-lecture, the professor paused to introduce Letitia to the class, and she entered confidently. After speaking to the class for about 10 minutes, she invited 2 students to lunch at the Western Hotel. We were shocked when she called out our names. "So, what did you guys think of her?" I asked as we hit the road. "She's amazing, Dad." "How did you even get to meet her?" Cindy blurted out, amazed. "Well, she mentioned she needed a personal assistant and I seemed to fit the bill," I joked, earning a nudge from Sandy. "That's not funny, Dad. Be serious," she scolded. "All right, what did you guys talk about at lunch?" I asked, steering the conversation back. She was curious about our classes and coursework, Sandy replied with a chuckle. And she had a lot of questions about you. We got the feeling she's interested in more than just friendship, Cindy added with a sly grin. But why you, Dad? She could have any guy, Sandy pondered, furrowing her brows. Yeah, think about it. From where we stand, you're a catch. But Letitia Rothberg doesn't know you like we do, remember? Even Mom didn't seem to know you that well, Cindy chimed in, her tone turning serious. The atmosphere between us grew heavy after my unintentional jab about their mother. I hadn't meant to sour the mood or turn them against her. I apologized, feeling the weight of my words. Your mom's a gem, and I shouldn't have said that. Don't worry, Dad. We understand more than you realize, Cindy reassured me with a gentle smile. We rode in silence for a while, until just as we crossed into Alabama, Sandy's phone rang. Hey, yeah, we got here about an hour ago. Great, no way. That's fantastic news. I'll let him know. Thanks for telling us. Talk to you later. Bye, Sandy said, ending the call with a grin. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw Sandy giving Cindy a thumbs up. What's that about? I asked, curious. Leaning over the front seat, Sandy spilled the beans. Guess what, Daddy? Letitia is coming to Huntsville Tuesday morning. She expects you to cover the expenses for the night and serve up breakfast in bed, she exclaimed. I was flattered by the news, but also felt pressure from Letitia, and now my daughters. It all sounded fantastic, and I hoped I was up for the challenge, not just for this one thing. The weekend with the girls went smoothly. They spent Saturday afternoon with their mom, but Clayton was a no-show. I asked them to keep Letitia a secret from their mom. We sorted through all the stuff they wanted to leave at the house, and by the time they left, everything was sorted out. On the drive back to Nashville, I made a promise they made me swear to try to get along with Letitia. When I asked what they meant, Cindy chimed in, just don't tick her off. Simple enough. They were excited about my move to town, but I still couldn't understand what Letitia wanted from an old guy who didn't even own a suit that was in style. Back home, I relaxed with a beer and the Sunday paper. No snapshots of Marcy and Clayton this week, but there was a blurb about Keystone Development hitting a snag with local financing. Winter wheat futures were plummeting in value, which caught my interest. I called up Terry Davis and invited him over. It wasn't a fancy lunch, but a couple of cold ones and a chat would suffice. Clayton Manning had a checkered past, to say the least. He'd been on a roller coaster ride of wealth and debt, dodging creditors and friends who lent him money. His latest project was failing, and people who backed him were disappearing. I don't think beer ever tasted so good. Monday morning turned out better than expected. The coins I put up for auction fetched a better price than I had imagined. The appraiser valued the coins at around $300,000. They didn't seem like they'd be worth that much, but they easily could have fetched over $200,000 in just a little over 2 weeks. I'll be free. If you asked me 3 months ago, I'd have thought it was a nightmare. But today, I'm eagerly anticipating it. The folks buying the house had sorted out the financing and were ready to seal the deal. It struck me as funny how comfortable Marcy felt with Clayton, that she didn't need any of our shared stuff. I wondered if she grasped how uncertain her future was. At 3, I had a meeting with the buyers of the house. A fat $200,000 check went straight into my offshore account. They had no objections to me staying in the house for another week, which worked out for both of us. The next morning I got a call. Before I even had my morning coffee, an unknown caller officially informed me that Miss Rothberg would be landing at 10:45 a.m. on Delta Flight 724. I arrived 30 minutes early, feeling a bit nervous. Some paparazzi had caught wind of her arrival and were camping outside the terminal. I tried my best to lay low. I parked in short-term parking, not expecting all this fuss. Instead of waiting for me to pick her up, she chose to walk alongside me behind the car. Naturally, the photographers caught my license plate, and the secret was out. I'm not used to all this attention, but Letitia seemed unfazed by it. She even apologized to me for it. On our way home, I couldn't help but remember how, as she stepped off the plane, I had the urge to kiss her. Silly old man. I felt sheepish about the emptiness of the house. Over the past few months, I'd gotten rid of everything I could. The only things left were the essentials that the new owner had agreed to take over once I left. My guests found my attempts to apologize amusing. There wasn't a crumb in the house, so we swung by Taco Bell for a quick bite, her choice. I promised her some dreamland ribs for dinner. It was refreshing to be around a woman with a hearty appetite. I expressed my confusion to Letitia about her presence, mentioning my assumption that she would be back to her usual routine. Letitia clarified that her visit was business-related, with a chuckle. She informed me that she had heard about my upcoming move to New York and offered her spare room for me to stay temporarily. She mentioned arranging for a moving truck to help with the relocation. When I asked how she found out about my move, she casually replied that it was her knack to pay attention to details. In a playful manner, I joked about her possibly being in cahoots with my daughters, but acknowledged that it would be hard for me to look sneaky. Despite being caught off guard by her offer, I couldn't find a reason to decline it and agreed to start packing with her. I had imagined she'd be more comfortable in a fancy boardroom or a posh bank, but she seemed content just shooting the breeze with me. Still, I couldn't shake off the slight awkwardness due to our age difference. As we sorted through my belongings, we ended up tossing out more stuff than we kept. She had strong opinions about my closet, and she didn't budge. Despite my pleas for mercy, she promised to take me shopping for some decent clothes once I got settled in New York. Once we finished packing, there were more boxes than would fit in my car, but not quite enough for a moving van. I hoped she had arranged for a small truck. I set aside my laptop and a little inkjet printer to check on an eBay auction. We were just about to sit down for dinner when another surprise popped up. A delivery van pulled up in front of the house. Letitia and I watched as the driver, dressed smartly, hopped out with a clipboard. "Are you Alan Simmons?" he asked. "I've got a delivery for you. Where do you want it?" "What in the world is this?" I muttered, puzzled. "It's for Mr. Ramon Jordan," the driver explained. "Got space in the garage." The spot where Marcy's Volvo used to sit was now vacant. I pointed in that direction and nodded. I caught Letitia covering her mouth, trying to stifle her laughter. I guess she found my confusion amusing. 5 minutes later, I was staring at a sleek orange sports car parked next to my old Volvo. "What in the world is this?" I exclaimed. With a hint of pride, the courier declared, "This here's a 28 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider Superleggera, a model. Ain't she a beauty?" Letitia could hardly contain her giggles. She wasn't causing a scene, but it was evident she was thoroughly enjoying herself. I signed off on the delivery and watched the courier leave in his fancy getup. I had no clue what I'd do with my new gift, but one thing was certain: I wasn't hauling it all the way to New York. Miss Funnypants here can keep her fancy wheels. My guest still had a smile plastered across her face as we drove off. I ordered up a full rack of ribs and a couple of brews. "Care to fill me in on the deal with the car?" I asked, curious. "Ramon. Big on winter wheat. Everyone thought he was nuts as prices started to tank, but he doubled down on contracts, and in less than a week, he raked in over $40 million, she explained. He was pleased with the cash, but the compliments about his clever move made him even happier. "Well, good for Ramon. Hope he didn't drop my name," I remarked. "Apparently he wanted to give you credit, but only if you were cool with it. He thanked me for bringing you to the party and wanted your address. I didn't know he planned to do that, though." As the ribs arrived, I watched Letitia dunk a few into Tabasco sauce before digging in. "Man, I adore that girl." "You know I'll be sending this back tomorrow, right?" I asked. "That's what I figured. No worries. Ramon won't be offended. He would have offered the money outright, but he probably thought you'd decline. That way you'd feel more obliged to keep it. We had to order extra beers because of all that Tabasco. I was feeling good and didn't want the night to end. At that moment, I would have given anything to spend the night with this gorgeous young lady. I envied those smooth, charming guys who could charm any girl into bed in a heartbeat. All I could hope for was a goodnight kiss. We couldn't chat all night, so eventually I had to head home. The next morning was fantastic. Turns out all my worrying was for nothing. As soon as we stepped into the house, Letitia grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. Being the gentleman I am, I made sure to tend to her needs first, and in return, I was treated to the best night of passion in my secluded life. Breakfast in bed was simple juice, coffee, and a Danish. "Sorry, it's the best I can do under the circumstances," I apologized. "It's perfect," she assured me, although eating off a tray in bed isn't as comfy as it sounds. After a few laughs and some adjustments, we relocated to the kitchen. "Breakfast in bed sounds fancier than it really is, Letitia," I chuckled. "Not to spoil the mood, but I'm curious why you chose me. I don't have much to offer and you deserve someone great. I've been burned by slick, charming lovers before. I won't fall for that again, she explained. I get it. You're into me because I'm not a player or an idiot, I replied. She found this amusing and chuckled. She said, Alan, I was impressed with your deal with James in New York. I replied with a shrug. Just sold some coins, nothing major. She then added, I found your plan to buy trust land intriguing. Smirking, I responded, Me? A philanthropist? Nah. I see myself as a cunning guy who took advantage of a unique situation to mess with his wife's lover. She laughed, and I couldn't help but smile too. I was amazed at her intelligence and how well she hid it. Was that a mistake on my part? I asked. No, Alan, that was brilliant, she reassured me. Her curiosity about me was piqued, and she wanted to learn more. You couldn't possibly have known what I was up to in New York, I protested. True. When I found out later, she admitted, you were checking up on me, weren't you? I realized I'm not naive. Admittedly, the boost to my self-esteem felt good. Unfortunately, Letitia had an early morning flight back to New York. Saying goodbye was tough, however. She left me feeling content and even entrusted me with the key to her apartment. The dealer couldn't pick up the Lamborghini until the next day, but that was fine since I had no intention of driving it. The movers arrived with a small truck to transport my belongings to New York. Terry Davis called with troubling news about Keystone Development's financial woes. Clayton had lost most of its backers almost overnight, and rumors swirled about missing funds. That evening, my almost ex-wife paid a surprise visit. So what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? I inquired. I need to talk to you about some things, she replied. I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help you in any way I can. Noticing the absence of my old Volvo, Marcy questioned the orange car in the garage. Sorry, Marcy, I sold the Volvo back to the dealer after you said you didn't want it. As for the orange car, it was a gift, but I plan to return it tomorrow, I explained. Marcy was surprised by this term of affection. Curious about the expensive gift, she speculated if it came from my new girlfriend. No, it was a gesture of gratitude from a cattle rancher I helped, I clarified. As the conversation shifted, Marcy hesitated before asking about the money from the house sale. It's all gone, I admitted. You said you didn't want anything, so I used the money to set up my new apartment for the move. Marcy seemed puzzled, but accepted the explanation. When asked about my destination, I disclosed my upcoming move to New York for a new job and a significant raise. However, I chose not to mention my plan to live with Letitia. I wasn't planning on spilling the beans about the Cayman bank account either. You never mentioned what happened to the apartment? She queried. It was just leased. The lease ran out and the owner didn't want to renew it, I clarified. Where are you living now? She asked further. We're staying at the Holiday Inn until Clayton finds us a new place, I informed her. I understand now, I commented, grasping Marcy's motives for wanting to move into our old house. She seemed a bit puzzled. I see, she responded, appearing uncertain. It was clear she needed assistance but was hesitant to ask. As the conversation paused, I offered, Is there anything else I can do for you? Marcy hesitated before requesting, Could you give me a ride to the Holiday Inn? The ride started smoothly, but then Marcy brought up my girlfriend. Tell me about her, she pressed. She's not exactly a girlfriend, more like a business partner, I explained. What kind of business? She probed. We're not into any business, to be honest. I'm just a clerk at the grocery store, I admitted. Marcy remained silent, gazing out the window, and muttered, Rascal, under her breath. At that moment, I had the perfect chance, to my frustration, to let her know how much those newspaper pictures hurt me. But instead, I chose to keep silent and smiled inwardly. Seeing Marcy in distress, I felt a twinge of guilt, but it passed quickly as I dropped her off at the motel entrance. She departed without a backward glance or a goodbye. Despite feeling a pang of regret, there was also a strange sense of satisfaction. Thursday morning brought an unexpected delivery, the final divorce papers. They arrived earlier than expected, but I wasn't complaining. On the front page of the Huntsville paper, there was a photo of Letitia Rothberg arriving at the airport, accompanied by her sincere friend. Each room at the Holiday Inn received a complimentary newspaper, so Marcy would undoubtedly stumble upon it. During breakfast, I emptied the safety deposit box at the bank, ready to move forward. My 7 pennies will definitely come in handy soon. During Letitia's visit, I expected her to inquire about them, but she never brought it up. All our discussions were purely social. Now I'm bringing up the topic of the auction prices. More than half of the coins were sold at that price, so I spent the rest of the day packaging and getting them ready for shipment. The remaining auctions had to close by noon on Friday. If all the PayPal payments go through smoothly, I'll be able to mail out all the coins the same day. Any dubious buyers will have to wait until bright and early on Saturday morning. I hit the road. Most of the money from my PayPal account got transferred to my Cayman account. I kept a small amount on PayPal just in case I wanted to make an impulse purchase. As I was leaving, the buyers of the house arrived, making it a win-win situation for both of us. The drive up north would take about 12 hours without any delays. Letitia was waiting in the apartment and promised to whip up a homemade dinner for my return. I wondered who would be cooking it. It was reassuring to know that I still had what it takes to capture the heart of such a stunning woman. I was confident I could meet all her expectations. Just as I was crossing into Virginia on Interstate 81, Cindy gave me a call. It turns out Clayton Manning had skipped town, leaving Marcy stranded without a car or a place to stay.
In this emotional narrative, we dive into the story of James and Sarah, whose love story began like a fairy tale. Their wedding was a joyous celebration, and their life together was filled with happy memories. However, subtle changes in Sarah's behavior began to sow seeds of doubt in James's mind. Friends and family hinted at unusual behavior, leading James to investigate further. His world shattered upon discovering Sarah's affair with a co-worker. Overwhelmed with shock, anger, and betrayal, James sought support from loved ones and began couples therapy with Sarah. Together, they faced the underlying issues in their marriage, leading to a pivotal decision point. Through intense, heartfelt conversations, they chose to rebuild their relationship, committing to forgiveness and open communication. Their journey of healing strengthened their bond, teaching them valuable lessons about love and resilience. In the end, they found renewed hope and a stronger, more committed relationship, ready to face the future together. Hello, my friends. I hope all you are fine. This is Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. James and Sarah's love story began like a fairy tale. Their wedding day was a joyous celebration, surrounded by family and friends who cheered for their union. The sun shone brightly as they exchanged vows, promising to cherish each other forever. Their honeymoon was a blissful escape, filled with laughter and intimate moments that cemented their bond. Over the years, they created countless memories, vacations exploring new places, family gatherings where their laughter echoed, and quiet evenings at home, sharing dreams and aspirations. James, a dedicated husband, and Sarah, a loving wife, built a life that seemed picture-perfect. James often reflected on how fortunate he was to have Sarah in his life. Their 15 years together were filled with mutual respect, deep affection, and unwavering support. They were partners in every sense, facing challenges head-on and celebrating successes with equal fervor. Their home was a sanctuary, a place where love and trust flourished. James's heart swelled with pride as he thought about their journey, the moments that defined their relationship, and the future they envisioned together. Little did he know, the foundation of their perfect marriage was about to be shaken to its core. It started with small, almost imperceptible changes. Sarah began staying late at work more frequently, claiming increased workloads and important projects. Her phone, once casually left on the counter, was now always with her, and she took calls in hushed tones. James noticed her paying more attention to her appearance, buying new clothes, and wearing makeup more often. Initially, he brushed off these changes, attributing them to her career ambitions and personal growth. After all, he trusted Sarah completely and had no reason to doubt her fidelity. As weeks turned into months, the subtle changes became harder to ignore. Friends and family occasionally hinted at Sarah's unusual behavior, their comments sowing seeds of doubt in James's mind. He found himself replaying conversations, analyzing Sarah's actions, and feeling an unsettling sense of unease. The loving, carefree moments they once shared were now overshadowed by suspicion. Determined to dispel his fears, James decided to investigate further. He hoped to prove his doubts wrong, clinging to the belief that their love was unshakable and that Sarah would never betray him. One evening, while Sarah was in the shower, James noticed her phone buzzing on the nightstand. He hesitated, then picked it up, intending to respect her privacy, but driven by an urgent need to know the truth. His heart sank as he read through the messages between Sarah and her co-worker, revealing an intimacy that went beyond mere friendship. The shock of betrayal hit him like a physical blow. When Sarah emerged from the bathroom, James confronted her, his voice trembling with hurt and anger. At first, Sarah denied everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. Finally, through tears, she confessed to the affair. James felt as if his world had collapsed. The emotions were overwhelming: shock, anger, sadness, and an intense sense of betrayal. He couldn't understand how the woman he loved and trusted had been unfaithful. Sarah, equally distraught, explained how the affair had started: long hours at work, growing close to her co-worker, and ultimately crossing a line she never intended to cross. She expressed deep regret, pleading for James's forgiveness. But James was lost in a sea of conflicting emotions, struggling to comprehend how their seemingly perfect marriage had reached this devastating point. In the days following the revelation, James felt a profound sense of isolation. Unable to process his emotions alone, he confided in his best friend, Mark. Mark listened patiently, offering a shoulder to cry on and practical advice. James also reached out to his sister, Emily, whose compassionate support helped him navigate the initial shock. Despite the comfort from loved ones, James grappled with the reality of the betrayal, his mind swirling with questions and doubts. The once clear path of his life was now clouded with uncertainty and pain. Desperate to understand the root causes of the affair, James and Sarah decided to attend couples therapy. Their therapist guided them through painful but necessary conversations, revealing underlying issues in their marriage that had gone unnoticed. Sarah admitted to feeling neglected and unappreciated, while James acknowledged his tendency to become absorbed in work, inadvertently neglecting their relationship. These sessions were emotionally draining, but crucial in uncovering the cracks that had led to infidelity. Slowly, they began to see a glimmer of hope, realizing that healing was possible if they were both willing to put in the effort. James stood at a pivotal crossroads, faced with the daunting decision of whether to forgive Sarah, remembered the love and happiness they had shared. On the other, the pain of betrayal was still fresh and raw. James knew that either choice would come with its own set of challenges and consequences. He spent sleepless nights contemplating his future, torn between his heart and his mind. In an effort to gain clarity, James and Sarah had a series of intense, heartfelt conversations. They revisited their past, discussing what had gone wrong and how they had drifted apart. Sarah was vulnerable and honest, expressing deep remorse for her actions and a sincere desire to make amends. James, though still hurt, found himself opening up about his own shortcomings and fears. These conversations were painful but necessary, revealing their true feelings and helping them understand each other better. Through this process, they both began to see the possibility of a path forward. After much soul-searching, James made the difficult decision to forgive Sarah. It wasn't an easy choice, but he believed in the strength of their bond and the possibility of redemption. Together, they committed to rebuilding their marriage, taking concrete steps to restore trust and intimacy. They set aside regular time for open communication, shared activities, and date nights to rekindle their connection. They also continued therapy, both individually and as a couple, to address their emotional wounds and prevent future issues. Gradually, they began to heal, their relationship growing stronger and more resilient. As time passed, James and Sarah found themselves in a renewed relationship, one built on honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. The scars of the past were still there, but they served as reminders of their journey and the lessons learned. Their love had been tested and had emerged stronger for it. They appreciated each other more deeply and made a conscious effort to prioritize their marriage. The future, once uncertain, now looked promising, filled with hope and a renewed sense of commitment. They had faced a tremendous challenge and come out the other side, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. James often reflected on the journey of healing they had undertaken. He realized that facing challenges together had not only strengthened their bond, but also taught them valuable lessons about love and forgiveness. He understood the importance of resilience and the power of second chances. James was grateful for the support they had received and the steps they had taken to rebuild their marriage. He hoped their story would inspire others facing similar struggles, showing that it is possible to overcome even the deepest wounds with patience, effort, and a willingness to forgive. In the closing scene, James and Sarah are seen enjoying a quiet, happy moment together. They sit on their porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, a symbol of the renewed commitment and strength of their bond. The once stormy skies of their relationship have cleared, leaving behind a beautiful horizon filled with promise. Their journey has been one of pain and healing, but ultimately it is a testament to the enduring power of love. As the sun sets, they share a smile, knowing that together they can face anything the future holds. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Life's unexpected twists and turns can make that happen. To those who stayed in touch, I appreciate it. There isn't enough time for the love you send. Seasons change, and so have I. You don't need to wonder why there's no time left. No time left for you. Picture a typical family. I'm the father, Trevor Fruiton, a 45-year-old guy with a receding hairline, in decent shape, but no six-pack abs. I could stand to lose 10 pounds and prefer contacts over glasses. I still don't need reading glasses. The mother of the family, Michela, is also 45 and has a slight tummy and a well-rounded figure, a look I prefer. She's an average woman, not strikingly beautiful or ugly, who wears glasses and insists on her full name. Then there's our 21-year-old daughter, Allie, a smart college senior who's gained some weight since her high school volleyball days. She's fiercely independent and vocal about women's rights, though she still relies on us. I'm the only one working, and finances have been tight. I didn't want Allie burdened with student debt, so she lives at home. But that doesn't mean Michela or Allie don't enjoy nice things. I drive an old F-150, while they have fancy luxury cars. Our home has little equity, and they funded their lifestyle with home equity loans. Our neighborhood is like many suburban areas, with occasional block parties. We're not particularly close to our neighbors, except for the neighbors next door, whose daughter Sally is Allie's best friend. After Allie started college, I felt lost. We had spent so much time together, and now there was a void. Even my volunteer work didn't seem to help, so one night I asked her if she was happy. I inquired, "Michela, are you happy?" She replied, "Happy with what?" I continued, "Your life. You've pulled away from me and lost your spark. I miss the time we used to spend with Allie. I guess I'm bored. How about us? Is there something I'm doing or not doing for you?" Michela assured me, "We're fine. I have no complaints. Why all the questions? I just want you to be happy. Maybe you can find a counselor to help you find balance and improve your mood." I pondered. "I'm not sure. I'll think about it." With a little chill in the air, I dropped the subject. However, 2 weeks later, Michela started weekly sessions with a life coach. You might think that I hoped things would heat up in our bedroom, but no. We maintain our usual twice-a-week intimate schedule. Are we normal? I have no idea. I've never discussed my life in bed with anyone, and I don't pry into my friends' intimate details. Mark and Cindy, our neighbors to the south, are in their 60s. Mark is not the handiest guy, and Cindy loves to bake, which has led to a few extra pounds for me. One day, I was working on Mark's sauna pump, and I overheard a conversation. They discussed, "Our sliding patio door is making that scratching noise again. Unless Michela is back from her mother's, it must be Allie." Haven't seen him in a while, so I'm sitting in the backyard gazebo. I overheard Allie's conversation. She mentioned, "He's inside somewhere. His car is still here." I couldn't believe my ears as I heard her say, "God, Mom, you're outdated. Give Max a try. Sally says he's a wild one, and make sure you're satisfied. Maybe this is what you need to spice things up in the bedroom. You've been complaining to our daughter about our love life. That's just not right. I know you should think about it. By the way, Dad told me he's going hunting next weekend. I'll have Jeff invite Max over. He might be scrawny, but he's into you. Sally also mentioned that his size is just right for some fun." I was fuming, thinking, so my daughter is trying to set Michela up with Jeff's friend? You don't have to do anything, but since you've never tried anything like that, consider experimenting with Max. I was seething, and the next pause was due to my boiling anger. The BCH and her offspring are plotting to end my marriage. What did I do to deserve this? Okay, well, let me know. Love you too. Bye-bye. I was really angry. I'm fortunate I didn't injure myself while fixing that frustrating pump. Things were miserable at home all week. I went out of my way to annoy Michelle and Allie. It worked, and I spent most of the week in my office or out in the garage. I've also sharpened and cleaned my power tools. I didn't postpone my hunting trip, though. I had someone keep an eye on Michela's activities. Seeing pictures of Allie, Jeff, and a skinny guy entering the house around noon on Saturday wasn't a good sign. Allie and Jeff left around 2, and the skinny guy left at 4. When I returned late Sunday, Michela was trying to be affectionate, but I wasn't having it. While it didn't confirm anything, I noticed Michela was sitting strangely, with her legs crossed and leaning left more than usual. She seemed a bit uncomfortable. Later in the kitchen, Allie sealed their fate by playfully slapping Michela's behind, and they both giggled with fake coughs. I felt a weight on my chest, and I worried that the people I was hunting with might have exposed me to something. I decided to sleep on the living room couch to avoid Michela. In the morning, I announced that I was going to the doctor with a fake illness, claiming I had trouble breathing. My boss had no issue with me taking the day off. My plan was to pretend to have COVID, which would give me time to move forward with my exit strategy. With accumulated sick leave and vacation time, I could take enough time off to reach our traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Announcing a COVID diagnosis usually keeps people at bay. Did I actually have COVID? I wasn't sure. I was fully vaccinated and felt healthy, but my heart was broken, and I wanted to part ways with 4 people while my lungs were fine. I checked into an extended stay hotel. There was no reason for me to live like a pauper. Michela seemed relieved when I told her I'd be out of quarantine in time for Christmas Eve. She and her daughter called me twice a day. To avoid revealing my plans, I was polite, but pretended to be tired to get off the phone. I spent my time plotting revenge and making preparations, like updating wills, beneficiaries, and emergency contacts. Apartment hunting was challenging and drove home the finality of my decision to divorce Michela and push Allie into the real world. When you're consumed by anger, all sorts of thoughts cross your mind. Most of them could land me in jail, which didn't align with my future plans. The idea of hiring an escort to trap Jeff came from watching a news story about a company that did the same to get rid of unwanted employees. It was a double-edged sword that would also hurt Allie, which, in my opinion, she deserved. Our artificial tree was lit up with blinking red, white, and green lights, and pine cones gave off a holiday scent. We gathered around the dining room table for our Christmas Eve tradition, which we had maintained for 23 years. The first 2 years were without Allie. Michela had cooked a meal, which was now in front of us. Normally, we'd offer a short prayer of thanks, but not this time. I stood up to speak, but it wasn't going to be a cheerful toast. I began by asking Jeff about Heather, and as I did, his face lost color. Allie turned her curious gaze toward him. Allie and Jeff had been together since high school, and it seemed like they'd be together for many more years. Things were about to change, though. Jeff stammered, claiming he didn't know a Heather. I pressed further, mentioning the raven-haired beauty with ruby lips he was with last Sunday night. Jeff was as stunned as a deer in headlights. At this point, he resorted to denial, claiming he couldn't recall the name, but his words lacked conviction. I confronted him with an audio clip from my cell phone, where a voice could be heard saying, "OCK, Heather, you're awesome, don't stop, God, I'm CM again." After turning off the recording, it was clear that the voice was Jeff's. Allie went into a rage, accusing him of deception and demanding that he leave. Before Jeff could get up, I stood behind him and pushed him back into his chair. Jeff and I prevented Allie from attacking him. I instructed Michaela to take our daughter into the other room and calm her down, explaining that I and Junior were going to have a talk. Michaela escorted Allie out of the dining room and into the kitchen. It wasn't done quietly, as Allie's string of four-letter words echoed off the walls. It only took a few minutes to explain to Jeff how things would unfold. He was to warn Max to stay far away from me, or Max would deeply regret his existence as a man. Jeff understood where he stood and what limited options he had from my perspective. A manila envelope moved, and Jeff agreed to do one last thing for me. I called out to the kitchen, asking Michaela to come back in with Allie. They both looked shocked and tearful. Let me explain how I got that recording. Jeff, her name isn't Heather, and I don't know her real name. She's an expensive escort, I must add. I hired her to seduce you and record the encounter. There's also a video if you'd like to watch it. Allie exclaimed, "Daddy, what the hell? You hired her?" I admitted, "I did, sweetie. How does it feel to be betrayed, stabbed in the back?" Michaela made a tiny noise, and Allie's eyes briefly darted toward and away from her mother. Both women were in tears. "Jeff, do you have something to say?" I turned on the video mode of my cell phone camera. Jeff stood up, took the folder in front of him, and then addressed Michaela. "Michaela Fruton, you've been served." As he handed the folder to Michaela, I wasn't sure if she would vomit or faint. She would likely do one or the other shortly after regaining her composure. The pine cones couldn't compete with the impact of Jeff handing Michaela divorce papers. While Allie and Michaela consoled each other in the master bedroom, I took charge outside. Allie's Audi, an early graduation gift, was loaded onto a carrier and driven away. Everything from her car was left in a trash bag on the front porch. Michaela's BMW followed soon after, but the difference was that her things were moved to a 23-year-old sedan, symbolizing our 23 years of marriage. My lawyer reminded me that I still had to provide transportation for Michaela. With our credit cards paid off and canceled, both of Allie's cards were canceled since I was the co-signer. I took another shot of bourbon. Cell phones were canceled as well. I had to give Michaela a basic phone with limited talk time and text messages. Allie received no such consideration. Both kept their iPhones with all the bells and whistles. In the garage, there was a for sale sign that I swiftly planted in the front yard with a few hits of my hammer. I couldn't actually sell the house yet, since Michaela's name was on the title, but I wanted her to know what our future held. Instead of listening to the Christmas music playing in the living room by the tree, I retreated to the basement. Sitting in the dark was comforting at times, especially when I heard the commotion above me. As they realized that none of their possessions were working, I was called some less-than-Christian names. Those names were mild compared to the ones I had been yelling in my empty hotel room while preparing for this day. "Trevor, we need to talk," was their statement. They speculated that maybe he went for a walk, noticing that his car was still at home, but my car was missing. They thought perhaps Dad had taken it, but he couldn't be driving both. They questioned the presence of an unfamiliar car in front of the house. Their phones weren't working, and they suspected he had canceled their service. They decided to go see if Cindy would let them use her phone. Calm returned to the house, but it was a tactical error on their part. I locked the entry doors. Now they were out of the house without working phones or credit cards. Both left their purses inside, so they had no identification on them. I felt no remorse when I shredded their driver's licenses. It may be petty, but I'm sure it will cause them discomfort as they try to rebuild their lives. Refilling my shot glass, I turned on the television and watched a few minutes of a cheesy feel-good special. Our situation couldn't be farther from the heartwarming story on screen. Sitting in silence seemed like a better choice. There was a commotion at the front door when Michaela and Allie returned. It was then that Michaela's daughter, whom I no longer claimed as my own, realized what was in the trash bag on the porch. Allie shrieked, "Oh my God, this is everything I had in my car. Daddy got rid of my car. Michaela wasn't buying it. He wouldn't do that." It's just not something he would do. Well, Mom, maybe the reason your car is missing is that he sold it too. I'll be mad if he did. I loved that car. With the doorbell ringing every 2 seconds, it was hard to catch all of their conversations. Michela was furious. Trevor, open this door right now. It's freezing out here, I shouted back at them. Well, Mitch, the keys to your new car are in the ignition. That orange and green Malibu parked in front of the house is your new set of wheels. All your belongings from your old car have been moved over. I'm told the heater takes a while to warm up. It has a full tank of gas. Maybe you could offer your Estimax and stay at his place. He probably still has a thing for you. One yelped, "Lock," and the other said, "He knows." Trevor, please let me explain. Michela made a feeble attempt to extend the conversation. A few seconds of silence passed, and Michela tried a sweeter voice. Trevor, I know you can hear me. Say something. Merry Christmas. You better leave, Mishi. And take that woman with you. A few minutes later, the old Malibu roared to life. It sounded like it needed a new muffler, but I wasn't surprised, as the guy practically gave me the car to get it off his hands. It wasn't getting fixed on my dime. Without any fanfare, the two traders drove away from the house. It had been ages since I heard about anyone dying from carbon monoxide poisoning due to their muffler. Maybe I'd get lucky. Probably not. About an hour later, I noticed my father-in-law's phone number lighting up my cell phone. We've never been close, but we tolerate each other. After considering whether to answer, I let it go to voicemail. Hey Trevor, I've got a couple of upset women here. Thought you might be able to shed some light on the situation. Call me. By the way, Merry Christmas. I muted my cell and sipped some spiked eggnog. Gradually, I came down from my adrenaline rush. The blinking lights of the fake tree put me to sleep. The sun was shining on this cold Christmas morning. All the dishes were still on the dining room table, but the microwave did a good job of heating up my ham and cheesy potatoes. Ham and cheesy potatoes work any time. There were gifts waiting to be opened, but Santa left me nothing, as those gifts under the tree were meant to be opened after dinner. Had anyone even noticed? I hadn't given a single gift to any of them, and I didn't open theirs. Instead, I gathered my most cherished belongings. I didn't include any photos of the family. Any that I found were now scattered on the ground. It took Michela a few days to find me at my hotel. The sun had set, and there was a bitter breeze. I left the latch on when I answered the door. I half expected another poinsettia sales pitch for a youth sports team, but it was a pale-faced Michela without her usual makeup or done-up hair. Michela pleaded, Trevor, please don't close the door. I didn't close it as I replied, What do you want, Mishi? She asked, A chance to explain. Can I come in? I firmly responded, No. She continued, Please, Trevor. Your neighbors don't need to hear this. I replied, What part of no don't you understand? I'd be happy to explain it to you. Michela sighed, Okay, let me start by saying how sorry I am. I can't explain my actions. I asked, What actions are you talking about? Mishi, please, I urged. Trevor, not out here. Let me come in and talk about it. She revealed softly, Having closeness with Max. I reacted, You had something with Max? Well, don't that beat all? Her eyes widened as I continued. You didn't know? She admitted, I suspected, but now it's confirmed. Actions have consequences. Wait, you were going to divorce me without any proof? I replied, Guessed right, didn't I? Have you found an attorney yet? She responded, I'm working on it, but we don't need a divorce. I'll do anything you want to save our marriage. I said, A little late for that. Why didn't you decide to do anything to save our marriage a month ago? I know why. It's because you're selfish and think you're above consequences. You thought you could do whatever you wanted without repercussions. Did you? Tell me immediately. A day later? A week later? How many others have there been? Michela recoiled at the venom in my voice. That was the only time. You have to believe me. One stupid decision shouldn't doom our marriage. I pressed, Which stupid decision? I count many. Planning to cheat might get you a reprieve. Cheating is a deal breaker. Hiding your cheating ensured no chance of reconciliation. Worst of all was involving your daughter, as I want nothing to do with her anymore. This is all on you. If you had kept your bedroom matters private, she would have never been involved. I hate you. Some of the neighbors were getting their kicks watching this drama unfold. I told her, Trevor, I said I'm sorry. How can I make this up to you? You can't. I hope I'm better off without you. Maybe I will be, maybe I won't, but it's on my terms. Divorce your cheating self and move on, understand? Please, Trevor, I know you're hurt and angry, but please don't do anything for a couple of weeks. It was just one afternoon. What can I do to convince you? I replied, just leave and never bother me again. Now, if you'll excuse me, halftime is over, and the bowl game is starting again. Thanks for stopping by. Not. I closed the door. Michelle knocked and begged softly, but my noise-canceling headphones did their job. I don't know how long it lasted, but she wasn't there in the morning. 11 months later, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment, continuing the Christmas Eve tradition, alone by choice. A simple meal that I cooked myself after getting the hang of cooking. They say you get stabbed in the back, but in reality, it shattered my heart, ego, and confidence. My self-respect remained intact. Many nights I wondered if I overreacted. Not once did I agree with that. I became disposable, so I left. Case closed. My time in the limbo of divorce left me feeling defeated. I was often irritable, and my boss had to reprimand me for snapping at coworkers. As time passed, I withdrew from social life and became a recluse. My coworkers learned to keep their distance, and I focused on doing my job well. I skipped company parties. Friends attempted to set me up on dates, but I turned them down one by one, and eventually, they stopped calling. My self-pity seemed never-ending. I took up running, and the sight of my earbuds discouraged people from approaching me. Between my new hobby and cooking for myself, I needed to put on some weight since none of my old clothes fit. Occasionally, a coworker would compliment my appearance, but it rarely went beyond that. The divorce proceedings stretched out for 9 months, and our house sold quickly. Instead of monthly support, Michelle received a substantial share of the proceeds from the sale. Allie and Jeff went their separate ways, with Jeff blaming me for setting him up with Heather. It's always someone else's fault I wasn't there with Heather. He was. And he was weak, like most men his age. A seductive woman can easily lead them astray. As for Allie, she left me angry voicemails, but I never returned her calls. Maybe someday I'll answer, but I wouldn't bet on it. I neither received an invitation nor attended her graduation. The situation was particularly challenging for Michelle, as she hadn't held a full-time job since our marriage. My attorney prolonged the financial matters as much as possible. Once the house finally sold, I repaid all the money. The court ruled that she should have been receiving maintenance, and now her comfortable lifestyle was gone. The same applied to mine. During some of the attorney conferences, Michelle tried to convince me that she had been incredibly foolish, but I remained stoic, leading to a few tears. Hate is a powerful emotion, and I couldn't seem to control mine. 12 months later, we continued the Christmas Eve tradition in my apartment. Macy, a friend who had been through a similar experience, joined me. No, we weren't in a romantic relationship. I wasn't ready for that yet. After we finished cleaning up the dishes, Macy led me to the middle of the living room, and we danced closely. At times I missed the warmth of a willing woman against me, but after about 10 songs, Macy wiped away a tear and left. We were both damaged goods. Allie's tone in the voice messages she left about once a month changed. She sounded apologetic, but I never returned her calls. My mother accidentally revealed that Michelle had moved in with someone new. I was surprised that my reaction was mostly indifference. I started making small talk with people again. Former coworkers avoided me, and new ones thought I was weird. Making friends was challenging, but I managed to bridge the gap with Macy, and we remained friends. In late January, I received a letter from Ali. I debated whether to open it, but curiosity won. The letter contained a short note and a selfie. Daddy, I'm sorry that I did you wrong. As you can see in the picture, I'm pregnant. I was wondering if you could find it in your heart to include a grandchild in your life. If not, I understand. Love, Ali. The return address was a few counties over, and there was no mention of a husband. In the picture, I felt torn. I resented what she had done to my life, but I had always wanted grandchildren. It would be a few weeks before I responded. In the meantime, Macy and I parted ways. We both knew we were only there for each other to lean on. She decided to move far away and start over. With a few lingering hugs, she left my life. To keep from going crazy, I took up pickleball at the rec center. It's similar to tennis, but with different rules. Eventually, I played with people of similar abilities, which felt like junior high school. During one game, I accidentally hit Shannon, one of the players, and her friends teased her, suggesting I should kiss it to make it better. I blew her some kisses, and as we were heading out, she asked if I could buy her a soft drink. She said I was very quiet and shy. We walked to a nearby Jamba Juice and continued chatting. We learned about each other, and Shannon was a great conversationalist, unlike me. She eventually asked if I was seeing someone, and I admitted I wasn't, and I wasn't sure if I ever would again. Shannon inquired about my previous relationship. Did she die or leave you? I responded, she cheated on me, and I either couldn't or wouldn't accept it. It's been a few years, and well, I guess I'm not over it. Shannon then asked, what about you? Are you dating anyone? I replied, no one. She seemed surprised. Really? I elaborated, I go on dates, but that's about it. When was the last time you went on a date? Shannon shared, well, I haven't been on a proper date since we separated. I've had people over for dinner, but that's it. I asked, when did your marriage end? She told me, that was December, 26 months ago. Pretty sad, isn't it? I reassured her, not really. When I was dumped for a younger woman, it took me a couple of years to regain the confidence to try again. This entire conversation was making my palms sweaty. Shannon noticed. Let's change the subject, I suggested. Why did you start playing pickleball? Shannon explained, my self-pity was getting tiresome, so I thought I needed something new to do. I shared, that's how I got into it too. My friends convinced me, and I've come to enjoy it. How about you? Shannon said, yeah, I got a paddle, and playing is helping me come out of my shell. Well, I have to run. See you tomorrow. I'm playing at 4 p.m. I replied, sure, nice chatting with you, Shannon. She offered some encouragement. You too, Trevor. Hang in there. Things will only get better. That evening, I felt good enough about myself to respond to Allie. Allie, I'm willing to try. You and I will never be close, but I'd like to at least meet my grandchild. Please let me know when the time is right. Under no circumstances will I be in the same room as your mother, Mr. Fruden. As Allie showed in the selfie, I estimated a May or June delivery date. I'm not sure if Allie received my response, as I haven't received another letter from her. The next day at pickleball, Shannon was quite flirtatious, as were a few other ladies. It felt good. After hitting a particularly good shot, Shannon said, you know, Trevor, you look really good in that shirt. I bet you look even better out of it. The women giggled as my face turned red. Funny you should say that, Shannon. I was thinking that you looked really good in those yoga pants. I bet you'd look even better out of them, too. There was hysterical laughter as Shannon turned bright red. Then the ladies started chanting, take 'em off! Take 'em off! Take 'em off! I obliged and took my shirt off. Shannon shook her head vigorously while wagging her finger at me as if I was in trouble. A few of the ladies whistled. As I put my shirt back on, Shannon mouthed, you're terrible, at me. I blew her a kiss. After the games, there was some light-hearted banter among the ladies, with one of them joking about looking great out of yoga pants. Shannon patiently waited her turn. I engaged in a friendly conversation, and eventually, Shannon asked if I'd buy her a soft drink. I responded saying, I was just about to ask you. Shannon playfully remarked, nice. Yoga pants, huh? Pretty proud of yourself, aren't you? As we enjoyed our drinks, I mustered the courage to ask Shannon out for dinner and a movie, fearing rejection. Thankfully, she agreed, and having been out of the dating scene for over 27 years, I felt clueless, awkward, and scared initially. But with time, I began to relax, and my previous upbeat personality started to emerge. After several dates, Shannon suggested I spend the night. One evening, Shannon surprised me with a personal question. She asked, who were you thinking of when we were intimate? I had to pause and appreciate you. I wondered what you saw in a person like me. I replied, a mirror reflection. Our passionate connection grew, and we became more intimate with time. Shannon eventually introduced me to her family and grandchildren, which was initially awkward due to their protective nature. However, as time passed, they accepted me. In early June, Shannon cuddled up to me in bed and suggested celebrating our closeness. As the moment grew more passionate, I realized what she meant, and I shared my knowledge of Ali giving birth to a girl 2 days ago. Our passions flared briefly, and then we made love for an extended period. The next day, I sent flowers to Ali to acknowledge her new motherhood. A day later, I received an overnight letter from Ali, expressing her sincere apologies and the desire to reconnect with me. She mentioned her understanding of the lessons I tried to teach her and the changes she had undergone. She also mentioned her daughter, Bonnie, and the possibility of us reuniting. I shared the letter with Shannon, who found Allie's words sincere and asked me what I intended to do. I expressed my concern about the impact on my relationship with Shannon and received a warm hug and a loving kiss in response. Shannon emphasized the need to let go of the past so that our relationship could flourish. With Shannon by my side, I knocked on Allie's door, surprising her. We shared affectionate cheek hugs and entered her apartment. I held Bonnie and she didn't cry, reminding me of how small babies' hands and feet are. Shannon brought up Allie's marital status, and Allie explained that Bonnie's father was reluctant to commit. Throughout the evening, Allie and I kept our distance. Before leaving, Shannon urged me to express my love to Allie, and I returned to Allie's apartment to give her a hug and tell her that I still loved her. 6 months and a few weeks later, the traditional Christmas Eve dinner was hosted in my apartment, with Shannon, Allie, and me holding Bonnie. I delivered the Christmas blessing, and we all dined and exchanged gifts. Shannon and I spent the night at her house, marking a change in our relationship. 12 months later, we celebrated Christmas Eve at Shannon's house, and life had moved forward. I had found contentment in my life's new chapter.
Growing up in a small town outside St. Louis, life was shaped by the rhythm of my family's business, a bustling bar and a restaurant that brought in all types of people. My siblings and I learned early on that running such an establishment required not just hard work, but a keen sense of discretion. And it was a world where secrets hid in plain sight, where laughter and whispers mingled in the air. This upbringing molded me, sharpening my instincts and shaping the way I viewed trust and loyalty, especially in relationships. Years passed, and I carved my own path away from the bar, building a career and a family with Vicky, a woman who shared my values and had her own unyielding ambition. We built a life rooted in shared experiences and mutual respect. However, my childhood memories, filled with tales of infidelity and hidden truths, occasionally surfaced, coloring the way I saw the world and those around me. The evening began like any other Friday night. I arrived home later than usual, only to find that my wife, Victoria, hadn't returned yet. I wasn't thrilled that she'd gone out for drinks with friends after work, but what choice did I have? Every marriage needs space and independence. Vicky, however, was always considerate, keeping me informed about her plans, where they were going, and making sure she didn't stay out too late. Most evenings she would be back by 8 o'clock, well within reason. This afternoon, during a work review, I got a text from Vicky. "The four of us are having a drink. I'll be home late, my love." Vicky always valued her reputation. These outings happened no more than every 3 to 4 weeks, but why did it bother me so much? That's a longer story for another time. To put it simply, I have trust issues, not just with women, but with anyone who spends time at bars without their spouse or frequently travels for work. Vicky did both, but the traveling was the hardest for me to deal with. You might be wondering why I have these issues and how they shape my view of Vicky. Here's a story that might explain it. I literally grew up in a bar. My parents owned and ran the most popular bar in our small town outside St. Louis, Missouri. They also had an upscale French restaurant in the same building. People from all over came for dinner and then moved next door to dance the night away. I saw it all, the laughter, dancing, and quiet talks over drinks that sometimes turned into arguments or romantic whispers. My parents were strict about certain things. From a young age, they made sure I knew the importance of discretion and prudence. The summer I turned 16, they decided it was time for me to start learning the family business. My older brother and sister had started working there when they turned 16. By the time I began, my brother was 21, with a degree in hotel and restaurant management, and ran the bar. My sister, nearly 19, had just started college. But at 16, I wasn't allowed to work in the bar. I started waiting tables in the restaurant. I didn't like it. Like most teenagers, I wanted to spend time with friends, have fun, and work as little as possible while making good money. I dreamed of working somewhere I could flirt with young, pretty girls. I'd been waiting tables for about 3 weeks when things began to change. The restaurant and bar attracted a mix of people, businessmen, young couples, and older folks out for a nostalgic night. One evening, I saw something that opened my eyes. "Oh my God," I whispered, standing in the doorway between the restaurant and the bar. My eyes darted from table to table, taking in sights I never imagined. Women in little black dresses, men leaning in to share whispers. My teenage heart raced at scenes almost too much to process. I was so distracted that my parents had to call me back to the restaurant multiple times. I remember one night when my sister Sarah caught me watching too intently. She walked up to me with a frown. "Donnie, you better get back to work and ignore what you see. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble." I half smiled and said, "But little sister, that's Mrs. Horton with a man. She's not even wearing underwear. Do you think Mr. Horton knows? I can't wait to tell the guys. This is unbelievable." Sarah's eyes widened in shock as she glanced over her shoulder and muttered, "Oh, crap." Just then, I felt my father's large hand on my shoulder. He squeezed hard and said, "Don, come with me, now." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. He walked through the dining room, past the waiter's station, and into his office. I followed slowly, my stomach twisting with nerves. When I entered, my father pointed to the chair in front of his desk. "Close the door and sit down." I did, my pulse quickening. I thought, this is going to be really bad. My father's expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Don, I should have talked to you about this before you started working here, but I didn't. I had this conversation with your brother and sister, and it never gets easier." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mrs. Horton is a beautiful woman, isn't she?" His question caught me off guard, and I felt my face flush. I fidgeted in my chair, unsure of how to respond. Before I could, he repeated, "Isn't she?" I nodded slightly and whispered, "Yeah." My dad leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers interlaced. He looked tired, his eyes weary. "Listen, Don, this business is our life and how we make a living. It supports our family, keeps a roof over our heads, pays for your brother's college, and will do the same for you and your sister if we don't mess it up." He paused to let the words sink in before continuing. "If you see someone you know come in with their family, greet them by name, chat briefly, and then get back to work. However, if they come in with someone who isn't their spouse, you act as if you didn't see them. You don't acknowledge them, you don't remember them being here, and you certainly don't discuss it with anyone else. Part of working in the food and bar industry means having selective hearing and vision. If a customer does something questionable, we ignore it and don't talk about it outside of this place. That's what they expect from us, and it's why they trust us." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. He fixed me with a serious look. "If I ever find out that you or anyone on staff has gossiped about a customer, they'll be fired immediately. No exceptions. We are known for our discretion. That's what keeps customers coming back. Do you understand, son?" "Yes, sir," I whispered. "Good." My father leaned back in his chair, some tension easing from his shoulders. "Now get back to work and remember what I said." I returned to work that day and continued working at the restaurant throughout high school and college. I never gossiped about customers, but I witnessed more dishonesty than someone my age should. As I got older and started working in the bar, I observed groups of men or women having boys or girls' nights. I watched as married individuals did things that wouldn't pass the test of marital loyalty. I learned. Maybe I learned too much because I became intolerant of those who attended parties and stayed late. I realized that many out-of-towners were just looking for fun and trying to meet locals. It was fine if they were single, but many were married or wore wedding rings. Often they ended up with other married clients. I grew to disrespect and feel disgusted by them, but treated everyone with the same level of politeness and discretion. Ultimately, we wanted a successful business. I noticed that people who came to parties and left early after a drink or two had solid, stable marriages. Those who stayed late often had troubled marriages, and many later divorced. During my freshman year of college, my father hired a new waitress. When I first saw Victoria, I was struck by desire. Over the next 2 years working together, we fell in love. We met each other's families and relatives. We talked and discovered that we were kindred spirits. We laughed at the antics and foolishness of the unfaithful customers we saw. Finally, the Christmas before our college graduation, I proposed to Vicky. By then, we both knew we shared the same values and wanted to be together for life. The only bump in our relationship was our parents' request for a prenuptial agreement. Vicky and I believed it was unnecessary, as we saw ourselves as life partners. My parents had a business, and to my surprise, a significant investment portfolio that they wanted to protect if I inherited it. To my surprise, Vicky's parents had the same concerns. They had considerable wealth and wanted Vicky's share protected in case of a divorce. The agreement they drafted solved these issues. We agreed that anything we owned before marriage or inherited from our maternal relatives would remain ours if we divorced. The agreement also covered pensions, which we would each keep. Only jointly acquired property after marriage would be divided. The agreement even addressed childcare, stating that if we divorced while having minor children, custody would go to the parent who traveled less unless it posed a risk to the children. Graduation day finally came. Vicky graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance and secured a great job at a local brokerage firm. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in construction management and a minor in landscape architecture. After college, I worked for a construction company for 2 years to learn the trade. Neither Vicky nor I were interested in running a restaurant or bar. My parents turned the business into a corporation, and we let my sister and brother manage it. Mom stayed on as the accountant while Dad remained the behind-the-scenes boss. After 2 years, I started my own construction and landscaping company. Since Vicky and I struggled to cover our mortgage and car payments, my parents provided the startup capital through the family corporation. I received a salary to manage the business. It was challenging at first, but Vicky steadily climbed the career ladder. One day, she came home elated. She had been selected for a position in the brokerage firm's compliance department, which ensured that all satellite offices adhered to SEC regulations. The only downside was the job required some travel, usually 3 to 4 days a month. My past made me uneasy about it. Over time, my business grew from handling small remodels to adding rooms, garages, and constructing new buildings with landscaping. I was content and never tried to take the business out of the corporation and make it solely mine. My salary increased each year as the business grew in value and income. I gradually accepted Vicky's travel, though I never felt entirely comfortable. Even though I wasn't thrilled when she went out with friends, it wasn't often, and she was usually home by 8 p.m. Of course, I occasionally traveled and went out for a beer with the construction crews or office staff. It was good management. But I made sure to leave after a couple of beers and was typically home no more than an hour later than usual, unless Vicky joined me. After 3 years of marriage, Vicky and I decided it was time to start a family. Our first child was Patrick, followed by little Suzanne 18 months later. She was tiny, and as she grew, she had me wrapped around her finger. By the time she turned 4, she was a younger version of her mother. When she gets older, she's sure to make your heart stop. As Vicky gained more experience at work, she became known as the go-to person for handling tough office situations. She could identify issues and knew how to help fix them. If she faced resistance, she wasn't afraid to call out the wrongdoing. If that didn't work, she would escalate the issue to headquarters and push harder. Many office managers who crossed paths with her ended up seeking new jobs. Because of this, Vicky's travel increased. Sometimes she was away for up to 2 weeks a month. We both hated it. We discussed it, and she believed she was on track to lead her department within 2 years, which would end the travel and come with a big salary boost. We agreed to push through until then. Due to the economic downturn, my small company had to take on jobs we would have passed on before the housing and stock markets crashed. We had already let go of about half of our staff. We weren't in financial trouble because we avoided major loans and heavy overhead, but we weren't as profitable as before. One small job I took on ended up steering my marriage toward disaster. I wish I'd never taken it. Maybe I'd still be happily married. Maybe not. That Thursday morning, I walked into my office wondering why I even showed up. The night before, I'd stayed late to finish all the paperwork on my desk. Vicky had been out of town all week for compliance inspections and, based on our conversations, wouldn't be home until late Friday evening. I considered heading straight to one of our 3 job sites to spend the day working hands-on and inspecting the progress. As most know, the best way to keep employees alert and ensure quality is for the boss to be on site, ready to step in. I hadn't been at my desk long when my assistant called me. She said, "Don, we have a casual environment here, and I try to treat my staff like family. Mrs. Sloan is here to discuss building a deck and landscaping her backyard. Do you have time to see her?" I thought, a nice little porch and some plants. I decided to take the meeting. A small job could still keep some of my guys employed and help their families. When Mrs. Sloan walked in, I was stunned. I could barely speak. She looked so much like Mrs. Horton, the first woman I'd ever been infatuated with, that it caught me off guard. I finally collected myself, stood up, and greeted her. "Mrs. Sloan, nice to meet you. I'm Don Patterson." She said, "You're here to build porches?" That's right, I replied. Please, have a seat so we can discuss your plans. I'm sorry, but you remind me of someone I knew when I was younger. It felt like she just walked in the room. Please forgive me. Jasmine laughed, a light and familiar sound. Don, it's me, Jasmine Horton. She must have noticed my confusion because she added, You know, Danita and Alfred Horton's daughter. We used to come to your family's restaurant all the time. I blinked in surprise. Oh my God, I'm sorry. You were younger back then and you've changed so much. Jasmine's laugh tinkled again. Well, I guess we've all changed. I was only 10 when my parents divorced, and after that, Mom and I couldn't afford to visit your place anymore. With a sigh, Jasmine continued. Anyway, my husband and I just bought a house near where we used to live. He said we could build a porch and maybe add a jacuzzi. If the price is right, we'd like to move forward. When I heard you had a construction business, I wanted to ask you first before anyone else. We spent the rest of the morning reminiscing and discussing her and her husband Stephen's plans. Once we had a rough outline of what they wanted, I told her I'd need to visit the property and take measurements to give an accurate quote. She replied, No problem, Don. I'm free all day, so just let me know when you'd like to come. I said, How about I come by at 1 o'clock this afternoon? I need to check in at my job sites and grab some lunch first, but then I'll have the rest of the day to take measurements and prepare an estimate. Does that work for you? Jasmine left, and I stepped out of my office to tell my secretary, Laura, I'll be out for the rest of the day. I'm heading to the job sites, grabbing lunch, and then going to Mrs. Sloane's to assess her project. Lock up when you leave and call my cell if you need anything. Everything was going smoothly at work, but I ended up staying longer than planned to meet with one of the property owners, which made me late for lunch. I arrived at Sloane's around 1:30. Jasmine greeted me at the door, and the first thing I did was apologize for my tardiness. Mrs. Sloane, I'm sorry for being late. I met with a property owner and waited for him. I tried to call, but only got your answering machine. Jasmine laughed softly. I've told you, just call me Jasmine. Sorry I missed your call earlier. I was cleaning the pool when I got home and left my cordless phone inside. But no worries, you're here now. Would you like something to drink, or should we head out to look at the yard? I smiled and shook my head. I'm fine, Jasmine. Let's just go check out your backyard. After taking all the measurements, I said, It's easy to estimate most of this, but since you don't have a hot tub yet, you'll need to buy one before I can give you a full quote. I need its dimensions to order the necessary materials. Jasmine looked surprised and said, Oh, I thought you provide the hot tub too. I don't know much about them. Can't you just include it in the project? I chuckled and said, Yes, Jasmine, I can do that. But we don't sell them, so I'll need to buy it elsewhere. To do that, I need to know the size you want. Will it be built-in or standalone? And will it run on 210 or 110 volts? Jasmine seemed flustered, reminding me of how she'd get upset over small things when she was younger. Finally, I said, Why don't we discuss it a bit? And you could call your husband or talk to him tonight. I can wait to finalize this until you've decided on the hot tub. Now Jasmine seemed genuinely anxious. Almost shaking, she said, Oh, no, I can't call him. He told me to handle this, and I plan to. He's on a business trip in Denver, so I won't see him until the weekend. Let's figure this out now. I asked her more about how they'd used the hot tub and learned they rarely had guests. Mostly she used the pool and backyard, sometimes with 1 or 2 friends. Once I had enough information, we went to my supplier, and Jasmine picked out a small 5-person hot tub. I took the measurements, and we returned to her house. I asked if there was a place where I could connect to the internet to access my office system. Some of my budget items changed on Thursdays, and I wanted up-to-date prices before preparing the quote. Jasmine smiled and said, Of course, Don. Come into the office. Steve works as a manufacturer's rep for Savin Business Systems, so he has a great home office for when he's not traveling. You can connect your laptop to our network or use our desktop. I stepped into the office and was impressed. It was set up like a professional business space, with a desk to the left of the door, windows overlooking the backyard, 2 leather chairs in front of the desk, and a bookshelf on the opposite wall. Jasmine walked behind the desk and pulled out a chair for me. She smiled and said, You can sit here while you work. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you, I said as I walked to the desk. I set my laptop down and sat. Jasmine handed me a DSL cable to connect. When I reached for it, my eyes caught a photograph. I paused, hand hovering, then pulled back and stared at it before picking it up. Jasmine noticed my reaction and looked puzzled as she held out the cable. Her eyes moved between my face and the photo I was gripping tightly. Is something wrong? She asked. concern crossing her face. That's my husband, my pride and joy. I keep telling him to replace that picture with one of him and his Chevelle, but he won't. I'm tired of seeing his ex-girlfriend every time I use the desk. Why are you looking at me like that? What's the matter? I carefully placed the photo back on the desk and stepped away. Jasmine, did you say your husband was in Denver? I asked, my voice strained. Her expression shifted to surprise. Yes, I did. Why do you ask? My wife is also in Denver and has been all week. Jasmine, did Stephen know you were getting an estimate from me or mention me at all? No, she replied, frowning. But what does that matter? He just told me to get a quote for the deck and hot tub as long as it didn't exceed $20,000. Why are you asking? I took a deep breath, meeting her eyes. Jasmine, the woman in this photo with Steve is my wife. Jasmine's eyes widened as she processed the information. Wow, that's strange. So, you married Steve's ex-girlfriend. We've only been married for 18 months. When did you get married? A knot formed in my stomach as I looked at Jasmine. Vicky and I have been married for 9 years. This photo can't be more than 2 years old. I recognize the necklace I bought her for Christmas just over 2 years ago. She also bought that outfit specifically for our summer vacation the following year. Jasmine hesitated, then said, If what you're suggesting is true, Dawn, I'm so sorry. But why does her being in Denver worry you? Jasmine, I continued, you mentioned you've been married for 18 months. Based on what Vicky's wearing in that photo, I think it was taken right around when you and Steve got married. When did he frame it? And what did he tell you about it? It can't be, Jasmine responded, her voice breaking. The photo was taken the day he won first place at the Big State Chevrolet car show. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes as she sank into one of the leather chairs in front of the desk. She continued quietly, That was 3 weeks before we got married. I never suspected anything. He told me it was an old picture, but he's holding the first place trophy. Damn him. Wait a minute, Jasmine, I said, trying to steady my thoughts. Let's think this through carefully. I saw plenty of situations like this when I worked in my family's restaurant. I learned to stay quiet because cheaters always get exposed eventually. Yes, this looks suspicious, but all we know for sure is that Steve and Vicky are in front of his car, hugging. The photo appears to be about 18 months to 2 years old. You're younger than us, so I doubt Steve could be one of Vicky's ex-boyfriends, but it's not impossible. Vicky and I started dating when we were 18 while working at my dad's restaurant. I know the names of most of her past crushes, just like you probably know Steve's. How old is he, by the way? He's 29 and I'm 27, Jasmine said. I nodded slowly. That's possible since Vicky isn't quite 31. I don't know what to make of this. Damn. What do we do now? If we confront them, they'll just deny it, whether it's something from the past or happening now. If they're involved and we confront them, they might become more secretive or even run away together. I feel like I need to ask, but until today, I trusted Vicky completely. I'm at a loss. We talked more and came up with what we thought was a reasonable plan. We decided not to mention what we had discovered that day. Jasmine wouldn't tell Steve about our conversation, and we would hire a private investigator to look into both Vicky and Steve. The next day, we spoke to the security company we used for our construction sites, and they referred us to an investigative agency they worked with. We talked to their staff and signed a contract for their services. We each wrote a check for our share of the advance. Jasmine used a shortened name on her check so that if Steve asked, she could say it was a deposit for the project. I used my business account, which Vicky never checked, so I was in the clear. I'd just cover any business expenses later. 3 weeks later, Jasmine and I met with the investigator. He said, Dawn, Jasmine, I'm happy to report that we couldn't find any evidence suggesting your spouses are seeing each other or even know each other. We monitored them every afternoon and after work, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. The only unusual thing was last Friday when Mrs. Patterson and some co-workers went out in St. Louis, visiting several bars and dancing with different men. Vicky danced with Steve once, but it was innocent. They kept a decent distance, and neither's hands wandered. There was no kissing or anything inappropriate, and they didn't speak to each other after the dance. I exhaled deeply and leaned back in my chair, glancing from the investigator to Jasmine. A nagging thought began to take root, that this entire situation might be fueled by the deep-seated distrust I had developed from years of working in the family business. I'd gone so far as to check phone records and install cameras and voice recorders in our house, as well as in Vicky's car and purse. Every search came up clean. Finally, I spoke. I guess this was just paranoia on my part. I'm relieved, but I feel ashamed for doubting them. Let's end this. Wait a second, Jasmine said, her tone serious. Didn't you mention that Steve is going to San Antonio next week? She hesitated, as if piecing something together. Yes, but why does that matter? I leaned forward, a new sense of urgency creeping in. Oh, we won't need to monitor anyone next week, right? That's exactly when we should be paying attention. Vicky told me 2 weeks ago that she has a compliance check next week. I can't remember exactly where, but I think she said Austin. Depending on their schedules, they could be within an hour of each other. We've already confirmed there's nothing suspicious here at home, so let's focus on monitoring this trip. If nothing turns up, I'll admit it was all in my head. It's reasonable to think that if they were just old friends, she might have posed for a photo with his trophy. Throughout the investigation and uncertainty, Jasmine and I saw no change in how Vicky or Steve treated us. Their behavior was exactly as it had always been. I thought long and hard, but couldn't identify any shift in Vicky's actions or attitude since we began dating or even in the early years of our marriage. She treated me as if I were the only man in her life. She still initiated closeness, responded to me warmly, and was as loving and attentive as ever. The Friday night before Vicky's upcoming trip, we went out for a date. Later, as we lay in bed, I turned to her and asked, "Do you remember when we worked at my dad's restaurant and used to laugh at all the cheaters and the ridiculous things people did?" I thought I noticed a brief tension in her body, but it was fleeting. She smiled and turned to face me. Yes, some of those people were really unbelievable. Sometimes when I see similar behavior at work, I think back to those days and wonder how people can be so foolish. Why do you ask? A guy at work thinks his wife is cheating, I said. He hasn't found any proof, though. When he shared his worries with me, I thought back to those times and told him to stay calm. I suggested he stay observant because cheaters eventually expose themselves. I also mentioned that taking the time to figure things out is better for the children, since divorce always affects them. Vicky's expression turned somber as she responded, "Why do you assume a marriage has to end in divorce? Maybe the wife really loves her husband and the affair means nothing to her. Maybe she doesn't want a divorce at all." "No, Vicky," I said. "He's like me. He spent time in bars and has the same low tolerance for infidelity that we do. I can't see him accepting a long-term affair, just as we wouldn't. Maybe he'd forgive a one-time mistake, but never something ongoing." Vicky tensed again when I said I wouldn't accept a long-term affair. But she smiled, turned to me, kissed me softly, and said, "I'm glad you're still the man I married. We know how devastating affairs can be. If he needs help, try to talk sense into him, and maybe we can both help him get through it. Good night, sweetheart." We settled in bed, but from all the tossing and turning, it was clear neither of us fell asleep quickly. The next week was hard for me. I called the investigators twice, but all they said was, "Our team is monitoring both of them, and we'll provide a report by next Monday." Finally, Monday came, and Jasmine and I met at the investigator's office. As we sat down, we felt like bad news was coming. The investigator leaned back and said, "You know, when you asked us to follow your spouses last week, I almost said it would be a waste of money. This turned out to be one of the trickiest infidelity cases we've ever seen. But you were right. Steve and Vicky are having an affair. We have photos and recorded conversations to prove it. I'm honestly surprised. If we'd only followed them locally, we wouldn't have found out. Based on the recordings, they meet only 3 or 4 times a year, far from here. They act as if it's coincidental when they're in the same city and work hard to appear as just acquaintances. But what we uncovered showed they're skilled at hiding it. They traveled to 2 different cities, stayed in different hotels, and met at a 3rd hotel without sharing a room. They booked adjoining rooms at different times, with Steve paying cash for his and Vicky checking in as Angela Foster with a government ID under that name. Steve checked in as Stephen Allen, also using a government ID. They stayed only from Tuesday to Thursday and only saw each other on those days. I leaned back, processing everything. "Foster. Vicky's maiden name is Victoria Angela Foster." Jasmine whispered, "Allen is Steve's middle name." "Well," I said, "I guess that's it except for the tears. I'll contact a divorce attorney as soon as possible." Jasmine started to respond, but the investigator cut in. "Hold on. That's not everything. Usually I wouldn't mention this, but something doesn't add up. I know they were intimate, but this doesn't feel like a typical affair. It seems more like some elaborate game. We have hours of conversations on tape, and most are innocent. There were only 2 intimate moments the whole week, and their pillow talk was odd. Here, let me play a recording so you can see what I mean. When the investigator played the specific part of the tape, we heard Vicky speaking. She said, "You know, Steve, I'm starting to think we need to end this. We've been doing this for 6 years and had our fun. We've proven that we're the exception to the rule. Smart cheaters. I'm sure you'd agree that sex between us isn't nearly as good as with our spouses. Plus, something Don said Friday night is bothering me. We talked in bed, and he reminded me of what we learned working at his parents' restaurant, that all cheaters eventually get caught. No one thinks through all the possibilities. At some point, every cheater either gets overconfident or makes a minor mistake that exposes them. I'm still uneasy about Denver. It was the first time we were in the same city, and I think it was a mistake. We shouldn't have deviated from the plan. We should only meet in different cities, close enough to rendezvous in the middle like we do here. Sure, it's a hassle to book 2 rooms and pay for an unused one, but we've proven our point. We're smart cheaters, and if you play it smart, you can cheat and win. I don't want to do anything that could make me lose Don. I love him more than anything. He's the best man I've ever known. Honestly, after our first couple of encounters, the real thrill for me was in the planning and scheming. The logistics, booking rooms, and coordinating details became more enjoyable than solving a puzzle or Sudoku. Zex just dulls the excitement. Don't deny it. I know you feel the same way. You even told me in Denver that you always left unsatisfied. The investigator paused the tape and looked at us. That's not all, but this part of the conversation was the most puzzling. I can't quite make sense of it. I started laughing, surprising both Jasmine and the investigator. Regaining my composure, I said, "I'm sorry, it's not funny. I'm furious. But I need to explain something. A few years back, a couple we were friends with divorced after the wife was caught cheating. She had been doing it for almost 4 years and was exposed by a simple mistake. The night we found out, Vicky and I were with friends, and we ended up discussing infidelity and how cheaters often make foolish decisions. We remembered what my father used to say when we worked at his restaurant and what we witnessed there. Vicky argued that anyone could cheat successfully if they were smart and kept it controlled. I disagreed, saying no one could cheat without eventually being caught. It might take years, but it would happen. I said even a minor innocent slip could expose it. We both stuck to our points, but for weeks afterward, Vicky would mention smart cheaters winning. I believe her affair with Steve began around that argument. Vicky has always taken pride in her intelligence, and I think I unknowingly pushed the wrong button. She wanted to prove she could do it and get away with it. She probably could have if she had stopped earlier. But now, no, she won't get away with it. Jasmine and I were now waiting to meet with a divorce attorney. Since sharing the cost of the investigator had worked well, we decided to share the lawyer's fees too. When we were called into the office, the lawyer looked surprised. "Mr. Patterson." "And is this Mrs. Patterson?" I smirked and said, "No, sir, I'm Don Patterson, and this is Jasmine Sloan. We found out her husband and my wife were cheating on us, so we split the cost of the investigator. Now we're hoping to split your fee as well." Attorney George Spaulding smiled and gestured for us to sit. "Of course. Let's see if we can work something out. Please, have a seat." I handed him a copy of the investigator's report and photos. Before he could review them, I said, "I don't think my case will be too complex. I also brought a list of everything Vicky and I own and how and when we acquired it. Here's a copy of our prenuptial agreement, which details property division and child custody. All I want is a divorce due to infidelity and a settlement per the agreement. Jasmine's case might be more complicated." I sat back and waited as he reviewed the documents. After finishing my paperwork, Jasmine provided hers, which was similar except she didn't have a prenuptial agreement. The lawyer outlined the divorce process, timelines, and his fees. He also discussed what Jasmine might want from her divorce. Finally, he said, "I think that's enough for now. I'll review everything, including the investigator's report. If I have questions, I'll reach out. Otherwise, I'll prepare the documents and move forward. Would you like me to serve the papers directly or contact you first?" Jasmine and I agreed we wanted a call when the documents were ready to be served. We left the attorney's office and went back to our routines, deciding to stay in touch. 2 days later, George Spaulding called. After some small talk, George said, "Don, I've reviewed everything you gave me, and I have to tell you, this is the strangest case I've ever seen. I even had 2 partners look at it, and they agree. Yes, there was infidelity, but it's clear that your wife loves you. Honestly, it doesn't even seem like a traditional affair. It feels more like a game where they had to include Zex to play. Don, are you sure you want to move forward with this? I mean, you said you had an almost perfect marriage. No fights, A good bed life, mutual love, and respect. If you don't mind me saying so, it's almost like you were part of this game too. Now, the only option left is divorce. Could you talk to Vicky and move past it? You know she told Steve that they needed to end it, and that it was just a game for her. I sat and thought for a moment before responding. No, George. I've asked myself that question a lot. At one point, I thought I could move on. If it had been just a game, without Zex, and only an emotional or pretend affair, I might have been able to ignore it. Maybe Vicky was angry that I mocked her belief that she could cheat smartly and not get caught. She couldn't let my statement go that all cheaters are eventually exposed. If she hadn't crossed the line and slept with Steve, I might have looked past it. But it's been 6 years. Even if the Zex wasn't fulfilling for them, it was still infidelity, and she has to face the consequences. George sighed. Well, it's your life. I hate doing this, but I have the documents ready. When do you want her served? I smiled slightly. George, she and Steve are on the East Coast this week. She's supposed to return late Friday afternoon. Can we serve her at her office on Friday? Her flight lands around noon, so she should be back at her office by 3:30 or 4. I'd like her served then, along with the recording I have. It's the clip where she talks to Steve about breaking things off. You're welcome to listen, but at the end, I say they lost. Like I said, cheaters always get caught. On Friday morning, I gathered my team in the office before they left for their work sites. I informed them that Vicky and I were getting a divorce and explained the reasons behind it. I instructed them not to take any orders from her or share any details about the business or my personal life. Once they left, my secretary Laura stayed behind. "Oh, Dawn, I'm so sorry," she said. "I can't believe Vicky would do this. I remember how much she hated cheaters." Laura gave a sad chuckle. Some of the things she said when we'd see someone we knew acting that way, I never would have guessed. At 4:10 that afternoon, George called to confirm that the documents had been served. By 4:30, the call I had been dreading came. Vicky's name flashed on the caller ID. I answered, "Hello, Vicky." I heard her crying, and then her voice, shaky and broken, said, "Don, can't we stop this? You know I love you with all my heart. I see now how stupid I was, but you made me so angry that night with your arrogant lecture about how smart cheaters never get away with it. For the first year, it was just planning and meeting to prove we could. I know you heard me tell Steve I didn't love him and that the Zex wasn't even good. We were going to stop. Please don't do this. I still can't believe you found out after all these years. I need to know how you did it. Vicky, this isn't on me. You did this," I said, my voice steady. "Now I have to end it. I thought we were on the same page about cheating. I thought we agreed it was unacceptable and that cheaters would always face the consequences. I can't understand how you justified this to yourself." I decided to tell Vicky how I discovered her affair. "Vicky," I began, "I wasn't going to tell you this, but now I think I should. You were right. Going to Denver was a mistake. The Thursday before you came back, Jasmine Sloan visited the office to discuss building a deck and landscaping her yard. She let me use Steve's office, and while I was there, I saw a picture of you with him and his trophy from the State Classic Chevrolet show. Jasmine mentioned that you were one of Steve's old girlfriends. At first, I almost believed her until I noticed that in the photo, you looked exactly like you do now, not years ago. And you were wearing the jewelry and clothes I bought for you about 2 years ago. I almost set my doubts aside, thinking that maybe you dated him before we met and had just run into him at the car show," I added. But then, after more conversations with Jasmine, I found out that you and Steve were both in Denver that week. We hired an investigator and tracked you for a month. Other than one dance at a party with your friends, there was no contact between you two. We were about to dismiss everything, thinking the photo was just a coincidence. But by then, Jasmine and I were already sharing a lot of details. I remembered her mentioning that Steve would be in San Antonio the same weekend you said you'd be in Austin. So we decided to follow you. If we found nothing, we would have let it go. But we did find something, didn't we? I heard Vicky's quiet sobs before she finally spoke. "Dawn, I love you so much. I don't want to lose you. Can you forgive me just this once?" I sighed heavily. "No, I can't. Not now. Maybe if it hadn't gone so far. But I can't move past the fact that you slept with him and how long it went on." "Dawn, don't you see?" Vicky pleaded. "It wasn't serious. It was like a game. We only had Zex because we were away and both wanted an outlet. We used each other to relieve frustration. We never said we loved each other. It was just about the game and finding some relief. Vicky, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you did it. You planned it, met up with Steve, and made a fool out of me. I'm sure it started at one of those parties, didn't it? Vicky sighed deeply. Yes, it did. We were chatting when he invited me to dance. The girls and I had been talking about a couple we knew who had an affair and got caught. I mentioned that there's no such thing as a smart traitor. While we were dancing, I told Steve about that, and he said, I bet we could beat that. I travel a lot. If I found someone who did too, we could meet far from home and never get caught. We danced some more, and then we decided to test it. He was a manufacturer's rep. I was conducting compliance reviews. We figured out we'd be in the same place in a few weeks and planned to meet. We developed a secret, non-committal arrangement, she continued. We agreed not to call each other at home or on our personal phones. We used burner phones and work calls just to schedule meetings. I even got a new credit card that was billed to my parents' address. We thought we covered every trace, except for the photos. I didn't know he kept those. Vicky gave a sad smile. One mistake and the traitor is caught. I'm so sorry, Don. I got caught up in the excitement. I love you. There was a click as she hung up, and I realized tears were streaming down my face. I sat back, lost in thought. When Laura said goodnight, my next memory was darkness outside. Both sets of parents tried to stop me from divorcing Vicky, with her parents' plea being the most heartfelt. One Saturday, they visited to see the kids, and we sat by the pool. Vicky's mother turned to me, her expression full of concern. Don, we know she messed up badly. That first night, she came to our house hysterical, saying she'd ruined everything. Eventually, she told us everything and showed us the evidence. I met her eyes as she continued. Don, if her father had done what she did, I would have left him too. But can't you at least try to forgive her? I see how much she loves you in the way she looks at you and talks about you. Her problem is always needing to prove she's the smartest. Did you ever consider that maybe you pushed her into this? She told me about the argument you two had before she decided to prove she could have an affair without getting caught. I took a deep breath and responded, Yes, Mona. I have thought about my role in all of this. I told her once that if she'd met him but hadn't slept with him, I might have been able to forgive it. But she did sleep with him. We both admitted to being cheaters before we got married, and she was the one who insisted on including infidelity clauses in our prenup. And then she did this. It breaks my heart, but I can't just move past it. The divorce was finalized, and I felt relieved that we had a prenup. We divided our investments and the house, which I kept by allowing Vicky to take her share from our investments. My business was safeguarded as it was family registered, so Vicky received nothing from it. Despite everything, I remained civil to Vicky and never restricted her access to the kids, though the trust between us was irreparably broken. One evening, I took the kids out to dinner when I noticed Jasmine walking in, looking hesitant. The hostess approached her, and I stood up to meet them. Jasmine, great to see you, I said with a smile. If you're alone, why not join us? It's just me and the kids. She smiled, a hint of relief on her face, and hugged me, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. Thank you. I'd love to. It's been a bit lonely since... I introduced her to my children, and shortly after, my father came over with a curious look. Don, who's this lovely lady? He asked. Dad, this is Jasmine Sloan. Her husband's family used to visit when I was a kid, I replied. Mr. Patterson's face brightened with recognition. Ah, I remember now. You look so much like your mother. How are your parents doing? They're doing well. Dad moved to Kansas City after the divorce, and I visit Mom a couple of times a month, Jasmine said. Good to hear, my father said warmly. Hope to see you around more often. After ordering, I apologized for not staying in touch. Summer is my busiest time, but that's just an excuse. I'm sorry. Don't worry, Jasmine said. I didn't call either. I'm here to celebrate. Steve finally agreed to the divorce. We sold the house and split everything, though he fought child support. Since he didn't want me working, I won. I'm renting a small place for now, but once I get a job, I'll find better. The kids grew restless, and Jasmine and I ordered another bottle of wine. Eventually, I said, I should get these kids home before they get us kicked out. It's been great talking. Maybe we can do this again. I'd like that, Jasmine said with a smile. The waitress informed us the bill was already paid. That old man, I laughed. He's trying to set us up. I left a tip, stood up, and said, Kids, say goodnight to your grandparents. I helped Jasmine up and offered my hand. May I escort you to your car? Of course, she said, taking my hand. As we waited, I said, I don't want this night to end. Before you came, I was just looking forward to relaxing by the pool with the kids. Jasmine smiled and replied, Me too, except I don't have a pool or kids. It's still early, I said, glancing at her. Would you like to come by after I put them to bed? She nodded with a warm smile. I'd love that. Later, once the kids were asleep, I stocked the mini fridge by the pool with drinks and settled down with a Pepsi. Jasmine joined me and took one for herself. I gazed at the pool, exhaled deeply, and turned to her. You know, I think your mom might have had a role in my divorce. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I was just wondering. Jasmine sat looking at me in shock with what seemed like a tear forming in her eye. I struggled to get up from my chair and sat on the edge of hers. I wiped the tear from her eye and said, Let me tell you how foolish I was when I was 16. I had only been working at the restaurant for a few weeks when your mother came in with a man I didn't recognize. They had dinner and then went to the bar to drink and dance. I always thought your mom was the most beautiful woman in the world until I met you. Anyway, I couldn't stop staring at her. My father not only caught me staring, but also overheard me saying that I would tell my friends about what I saw at school on Monday. I paused. Phew. I still remember the reprimand and lecture I got that night in his office. That talk shaped my thoughts on marital fidelity to this day. You know that later, when Vicky started working with us, she got the same lecture. We often shared stories about what we witnessed at the restaurant and thought we were on the same page with my father's views. Maybe I was too strict about fidelity for my own good. That night with your mother set me on the rigid path I've followed throughout this case. I'm sorry, and before you ask, no, none of my family or staff ever told anyone about your mother. I don't know who did, but your parents didn't divorce until almost a year later. As far as I know, that was the only time she and her companion were at the restaurant. Jasmine looked at me and said, Well, maybe some good came from all this, or maybe not, depending on how you see it. She married that man, and they stayed together until he died in a car accident a few years ago. I think she may have cheated on him, too. I've always heard that once a cheater, always a cheater. Once I was sure Jasmine had calmed down, I returned to my chair and we moved on to lighter topics. I found out she had a degree in accounting and had worked in the field for some time. I smiled, remembering how my mother used to complain about wanting more rest, but couldn't, as she managed the books for the bar and restaurant and supervised the waitstaff. I thought hiring a nanny for Laura might be a good idea. The following Wednesday, I had just come home from work and was drinking a glass of water when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it and was surprised when Jasmine, crying, threw herself into my arms and tried to kiss me. Through her tears, she said, Thank you. Oh, thank you. Your parents called and offered me a job. I went for an interview and test, and they hired me. I start tomorrow, and they're paying me more than I expected. She began crying again, and I held her close, stroking her hair. Over the next few months, Jasmine and I grew even closer. I started taking the kids out to dinner several nights a week, and timed our visits so Jasmine could join us when she was free. When Christmas arrived, Jasmine was invited to dinner at the Pattersons. Together, we helped prepare the New Year's party at the bar. My father and siblings jokingly complained about how we were always hugging and kissing when they looked for us. By then, we were an established couple. Invitations to one of us naturally included the other. Valentine's Day came, which was another big night for the restaurant and bar, so Jasmine and I were working. After most of the customers had left, I walked into the dining area and said, Jasmine, could you come to the bar for a moment? The band is on a break, and I need help with something on stage. Jasmine smiled. Sure, I needed a break anyway. Once on stage, I asked her to hold the microphone stand as I knelt down. I tugged on its base and said, Hey, can we get a light over here? Jasmine glanced around for a light source, and one of the spotlights shone on us. I said, Jasmine. The microphone picked up my voice and echoed through the room. Jasmine looked down and saw me holding out a small black box. At first, she thought it was part of the mic stand. The bright light made it hard to see, so she reached for it, confused. I spoke again. Jasmine, I'm down here at your feet, asking you, will you marry me? You brought light back into my life, and I'm only happy when I'm with you. As her fingers touched the box, she realized what I was saying. She opened it and found a beautiful ring inside. Her jaw dropped, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Slowly, she took the ring from the box, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knelt and kissed me deeply. Yes, she whispered. Oh, yes. I love you with all my heart. I've been hoping for this moment for months. The room erupted with cheers and applause. When Jasmine pulled away, she saw my entire family gathered around. My brother lifted her up and hugged her, and she was passed from person to person, receiving hugs and congratulations. Jasmine planned the wedding for June. Over the months, she gradually moved her things from her small apartment into my house. At the post-wedding reception, we opened our gifts. At the bottom of the pile was a single yellowed envelope. Inside was an old, heart-shaped valentine with the original signature erased. On the valentine were written the words, "I received this valentine from the only man I've ever loved on our first Valentine's Day. I kept it safe all these years. It feels right to pass it on to you now, as a symbol of my heart moving from me to you. May your life be filled with love and care for one another. May you never break each other's hearts, or let pride come between you. Congratulations, wishing you both a lifetime of happiness. With all my love, Victoria."
Title: At a charity event hosted by my wife, her lover's wife walked in, wearing my wedding ring. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. David Miller had always thought of his marriage as the epitome of perfection. Married to Emma, a stunning and charismatic philanthropist, their life in the bustling city of New York seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Emma was a woman who could light up any room, especially at high-profile charity events like the one they were hosting tonight at the Plaza Hotel. The event was a grand affair, with glittering chandeliers, elegantly dressed guests, and the hum of refined conversations filling the air. As David stood by the bar, sipping his bourbon, he couldn't help but admire his wife's poise and charm as she moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging smiles with New York's elite. Yet, amidst all the glamour, something felt off. Emma's usual warmth toward him seemed replaced by a strange aloofness, and David noticed her eyes darting nervously across the room, as if searching for someone. A pang of unease settled in his chest, but he brushed it off, telling himself that she was merely overwhelmed by the scale of the event. Little did he know, the perfect facade of his marriage was about to crack wide open in a way he could have never anticipated. As David lingered near the bar, his unease grew sharper, like a faint but persistent itch he couldn't ignore. The glittering charity event continued in full swing, with guests clinking champagne glasses and the soft hum of a live jazz band filling the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Suddenly, the crowd seemed to part, and a woman entered the room with an air of quiet confidence that turned heads. Dressed in an understated yet elegant black gown, Clara Anderson walked in, her every step commanding attention. David's eyes were drawn to her almost magnetically, but what truly froze him in place was the familiar sparkle of a diamond ring on her left hand. His wedding ring. His heart skipped a beat, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the impossible. Clara's eyes met his, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Her gaze was calm yet piercing, a mix of pity and defiance that sent a chill down his spine. Summoning courage, Clara approached him, her voice low but deliberate. "We need to talk," she said, her words carrying a weight that made David's pulse quicken. She didn't need to say much. Her presence and the ring on her finger were clues enough that she held answers to questions he hadn't yet dared to ask. Her cryptic remarks about Emma and the ring only deepened his suspicions, pulling him into a web of betrayal he hadn't seen coming. In that moment, amidst the grandeur of the charity gala, David's world began to unravel, one veiled hint at a time. David's pulse quickened as Clara's cryptic words echoed in his mind. Determined to uncover the truth, he followed her through the lavish halls of the Plaza Hotel, leaving behind the bustling charity gala. They found a quiet corner in a side lounge, the muted light casting long shadows on the room's ornate decor. Clara's poised exterior began to crack as she sat down, her fingers nervously tracing the outline of his wedding ring. "Your wife and my husband," she began, her voice trembling with anger and pain. She explained how her husband, a successful real estate mogul named Richard Anderson, had given her the ring, a twisted trophy of his affair with Emma. "He said it was a souvenir," Clara spat bitterly, the words dripping with betrayal. As Clara's revelations unraveled, David felt his mind spiral. Fragmented memories began to surface. Emma's late-night phone calls she dismissed as work emergencies, the sudden weekends away for conferences, and the subtle but growing emotional distance between them. Each recollection now carried the weight of evidence, painting a picture he had been too blind or too trusting to see. Clara's story mirrored his own heartbreak. She spoke of her husband's lies, his frequent business trips, and the growing suspicion she had ignored until finding the damning proof: the ring. In their shared pain, David and Clara began piecing together the timeline of the affair. The gala, it seemed, was the nexus of their spouse's betrayal, a playground for their infidelity hidden in plain sight. Clara's heartbreak mirrored his own, and together they formed an unlikely alliance, determined to confront the truth head-on. In that quiet room, surrounded by the echoes of betrayal, David realized the perfection of his marriage had always been a facade, and the reality was far darker than he had imagined. The weight of Clara's revelations burned like fire in David's chest as they stepped back into the grandeur of the Plaza Hotel's main ballroom. The charity gala was still in full swing, the affluent guests blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Fueled by a mix of anger and heartbreak, David could no longer contain himself. Spotting Emma by the stage, her radiant smile and practiced charm now felt like a cruel mockery of their life together. He strode toward her, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd as he called her name. Conversations faltered, and all eyes turned to them as David confronted Emma under the spotlight she had so carefully curated. "What's this, Emma?" he demanded, holding up Clara's hand with his wedding ring glinting under the chandelier. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Emma's polished facade faltered. At first, she laughed nervously, attempting to dismiss the accusation as absurd. But the weight of Clara's presence, combined with the undeniable evidence, left her no room to maneuver. As David's voice grew colder, recounting the details of her affair with Richard Anderson, Emma's composure crumbled. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes brimming with tears. Not of remorse, but of being caught. The tension reached its peak when Richard entered the room, drawn by the escalating whispers. His presence acted like gasoline on a fire. Emma instinctively stepped toward him, as if seeking refuge, but the act only deepened David's betrayal. Clara, unable to hold back her own anger, stepped forward to confront her husband. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fury as she detailed the lies, the deceit, and the ring that had shattered both their lives. Richard tried to defuse the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the mounting evidence left no room for doubt. The room grew heavy with an uncomfortable silence as the public confrontation reached its breaking point. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispers of scandal spreading like wildfire through New York's elite circles. Emma and Richard, exposed and humiliated, stood frozen as David and Clara finally walked away from the confrontation, their pain now shared but their dignity intact. It was a moment of raw emotion and irreversible change, the perfect veneer of the gala shattered to reveal the dark truth beneath. As the guests dispersed and the once vibrant ballroom of the Plaza Hotel fell silent, David found himself alone with Emma in one of the hotel's private lounges. The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken words. Emma, her makeup smudged and her earlier confidence reduced to fragility, sat across from him. "David, please," she began, her voice trembling. "I can explain." But her explanation, rooted in loneliness, unmet needs, and misguided choices, felt hollow against the enormity of her betrayal. Each word she uttered seemed to widen the chasm between them. The trust that once bound them now shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, Clara had already made her decision. She had left the event with her head held high, her resolve unshaken. In the back of a yellow cab navigating Manhattan's glittering streets, she texted Richard a single message. "We're done." Her decision to leave was swift but firm, born out of the clarity that there was no salvaging a relationship built on lies. For David, however, the choice was far murkier. As Emma's pleas turned to tears, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Should he attempt to rebuild what had been destroyed? Or was this the end of a chapter he had once thought would last forever? His thoughts spiraled as he replayed moments from their marriage, the shared laughter, the quiet nights, the growing silences that he had ignored. Had he been blind to the cracks all along? Or had Emma's betrayal simply exposed the truth? That their marriage had been a facade, a carefully curated image for the world to see. Sitting in the dimly lit lounge, David felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The fallout of the night had left him raw and broken, yet he also felt a strange sense of clarity. Whether he forgave Emma or walked away, one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. As dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, David sat alone in his apartment, staring at the wedding ring he had slipped off his finger the night before. The night's events still felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Emma had returned to their shared home after their conversation at the Plaza Hotel, her tear-streaked face a stark contrast to the radiant host she had been just hours before. The silence between them was deafening, yet it spoke volumes. David now stood at a crossroads, faced with the weight of a decision that would define the rest of his life. In one version of this ending, David chooses to separate from Emma, the betrayal too deep to mend. In a symbolic act of closure, he leaves the wedding ring on the kitchen counter before walking out of the apartment, the cool morning air offering a bittersweet sense of freedom. This decision, while painful, becomes a testament to his self-respect and unwillingness to live a life built on broken vows. Alternatively, David might find himself willing to rebuild, though not without conditions. He tells Emma that their marriage can only survive if she seeks therapy and earns back his trust, a journey that will require time, patience, and a genuine commitment from both sides. This decision reflects his capacity for forgiveness, but also his understanding that true reconciliation comes with boundaries and mutual effort. In a third possibility, the story concludes ambiguously. David walks out of the Plaza Hotel into the quiet streets of New York, his mind clouded with unresolved emotions. The readers are left to interpret whether he will choose reconciliation, separation, or something in between, mirroring the complexities of real-life relationships. Meanwhile, Clara finds her own sense of closure. Having confronted her husband and made the decision to leave him, she begins a new chapter of her life with her head held high. Her courage and decisiveness serve as a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil David is still navigating. Whether the story ends in separation, rebuilding, or ambiguity, the underlying theme remains the same. Betrayal may shatter the foundations of trust, but it also forces individuals to confront uncomfortable truths and make choices that shape their future. For David and Clara, the events of the gala mark not just an ending, but also the possibility of new beginnings.